Recording in progress.
Hello.
Said hello to you in a while.
Hey, good evening. You please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Well, welcome. I'd like to call the Milton Planning Commission meeting of, February 24th, 2022 to order. This is a regular meeting of the City of Milton Planning Commission. I'm Kurt Nolte, and this is a 7-member commission appointed by the City of Milton Mayor and City Council, created for the purpose of holding public hearings and making recommendations on rezoning, use permits, concurrent variance applications, comprehensive land use plan and plan map, and other related plans and amendments. In attendance tonight, we have Commissioner Laura Wysong, we have Commissioner Stephanie Butler, we've got Commissioner Ron Gilbert, we've got Commissioner Samit Shah, we've got Commissioner Judy Birds, and we've got Commissioner Fred Edwards. The petitions will be heard in the sequence listed on the posted agenda, and I would like to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures conducting this meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The applicant may choose to save some of the time for rebuttal following the presentation of the opposition. The opposition will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present its position. If time remains, the opposition will be allowed to rebut. Since the burden of proof is upon the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks, provided time remains with the allotted time. The staff of the Community Development Department will be keeping track of time and will inform you periodically of the remaining time for your presentation. Each speaker must fill out one of the yellow cards before speaking and leave it with a staff member of the Community Development Department. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization, if applicable, before beginning the presentation. When an opponent of a rezoning action has made, within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of the rezoning action opposed, Campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official of the local government which will consider the application, it shall be the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure with the governing authority of the representative local government at least 5 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. A violation of the relevant state statute constitutes a misdemeanor. In other words, if you contributed $250 or more to a City of Milton council member, and you have not filed a disclosure prior to the Planning Commission meeting tonight, the city attorney strongly suggests that you have someone else speak for your point of view. Each application has been properly filed with the Department of Community Development. Signs have been posted on each site. The matter has been advertised and the notices have been mailed to property owners affected by this zoning as required by the Milton zoning ordinance. The Planning Commission's recommendation will be forwarded to the City of Milton Mayor and City Council for final disposition in approximately 5 weeks on the first Monday of each month at 6 p.m. here in Council Chambers. The Community Development Department has reviewed each application in conjunction with various agencies and departments, both internal and external to the city. Staff's recommendations, findings, and conclusions are here before us in written form, which has been made available to all petitioners and to the public. Demonstration of any sort within the chamber is prohibited. So please refrain from any applause, dialogue with the person speaking, or outburst. Please turn off all cell phones and place them on silent. All remarks will be addressed by the Planning Commission. Please show the same respect to the person speaking that you would expect to receive yourself. In addition, the applicant shall not submit material to the Planning Commission during the meeting unless requested to do so by the Commission. All material that you wish to be reviewed by the Commission in consideration for your application should be submitted to the staff of the Community Development Department to be included in the normal distribution of packages to the Commission. Finally, to the applicant, if your petition is deferred, in accordance with the Milton zoning ordinance, you are required to update or obtain new sign for reposting. Failure to update or repost will result in further delay. There are no exceptions. At this point, I think we'll have a call for general public comment. Robin, do we have any of the general public comment?
We do not.
Okay, great. So at this point, we're thinking of making a change to the agenda. What we're thinking of doing, we've got Bob Buscemi here, and he was going to present the Deerfield Highway 9 developments by staff.
Yep. Chairman and fellow commissioners, I move that we move the topic 7A on the presentation of the Deerfield Highway 9 development by staff to commence as our next agenda item before approval of the action minutes, and move for the approval of the agenda as amended.
Okay, we've got a motion by Commissioner Byrd, second by Commissioner Gilbert. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All opposed? I guess that's done. So with that, I guess, Robin, if you want to set up the presentation by Bob, or Bob, I think you're more than capable of doing that.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome new members. Really nice to be in front of the Planning Commission again. The reason I'm here tonight is just because I know the Planning Commission at the last meeting expressed some interest in getting a feel for what staff is doing with the Highway 9 corridor and the Deerfield area, the form-based code for the Deerfield area. And actually, we do have some initiatives that we've been doing. Everybody's, I think, aware or should be of, some of the major developments that are starting to come in and starting to be planned or conceptualized for the Deerfield area. And we could probably go through those subsequently in a different meeting. But what I really wanted to let the board know tonight is that staff has been working with the city of Alpharetta and the CID, which is an organization that does studies and looks at different improvements, as well as with ARC, which is another organization that funds and looks at various road improvements across the various cities. So we look at things regionally. And then, so we're looking at, we did our initial LCI study, which is the Livable Centers Initiative. So it's a study, it's a planning study that you do that, and that's like one of the first steps. So we did the original one for Deerfield back in 2012. So you're looking at 10 years. Sarah's reminding me that it's 10 years. So what happens is when we first started looking at the Deerfield area, we did an LCI study in conjunction with ARC, Atlanta Regional Commission, which if you're not familiar with that term, a lot of acronyms, and I'm sorry. I fly off with acronyms, right? Anyway, we did it with in conjunction with ARC, and you know, it's all joint funding. They match our funds, and we put some money in as a city, they put some money in, and then they hire a consultant, and we go ahead and we look at things like, as part of that, they develop transportation analogies and studies and see what's going on between the cities and how it impacts. And then we look at land use, and we start to look at different master plans, you know, different visualizations of the area, how it's going to get built out. So the last one we did for Deerfield was, again, 10 years ago. And now we're approaching ARC and we're asking them to approve a refresh because it's been 10 years. So we're going back to them, and on March 7th, we'll be going to council asking for a formal, you know, approval of funds and the procedure to go ahead. But we've been working with the group, with the CID folks, with Alpharetta, because Alpharetta's also got a lot of development that they're looking to do on Windward and their area. So all of these things, like, you know, the old HP site is getting redeveloped, and that's going to be huge. So all of these things are going to have a huge impact. We have a new interchange that's coming on 400. Sarah will talk to you tonight about a potential flyover of Webb Road, you know, over 400. So all of the widening of Highway 9. So all of these infrastructure improvements will definitely have an impact in and of itself in the area. And then as part of the study, we'll interject all our land use that we're looking at. And then from there, we'll look at branding, looking at both aesthetic branding and website branding, you know, so people can navigate through the area. And we're trying to do this all in conjunction with the various cities. We've been working with Forsyth County, Alpharetta, and Milton now on a technology corridor for that area. So what is that going to do with adding, you know, fiber and, you know, various infrastructure that will help facilitate that? So I guess what I'm saying to you all tonight is, you know, we don't have any major presentations. I'm going to have Sarah get up and talk a little bit more in detail, but we will be coming back and keeping you all abreast of everything that's going on and where we are, and then we'll get feedback like we always do, and you'll all participate in that process so that we can then incorporate the ideas that you're looking for in that area, and we can kind of show you what's there, what we originally thought it would be, and then you can kind of tell us where you think it should go, and we'll start incorporating those ideas into the study. And then as a result, once we get that done, if there's any zoning changes that need to be made, then we'll sit with Robin and go through and look at various changes to the form-based code if we have to, and then we'll just implement them. So it's kind of a nice thing. It's structured. I think it's a nice way to go. It's instead of just looking at it and then saying, oh, let's get our own consultant, independent, and start trying to implement new ideas. I'd rather do it through the LCI study because it really incorporates and encompasses the whole district. So, you know, we really know what's going on, what's happening in Forsyth, what's happening in Alpharetta. Well, how does it impact our development pattern? We can't do anything in a vacuum. It's really a larger picture. So let me get Sarah, if you don't mind coming up, and you can shed some more light on it.
Good evening. I'm Sarah Leaders. I'm the Public Works Director here at the city, and I've been working with Bob on getting some ideas together for this LCI update. So the application window is open right now. So we will find out, I think, in April if we're awarded the grant funding. And then the local match would be a split between North Fulton CID, Milton, and Alpharetta. So that's how that's structured. And we've already held a pre-application meeting with ARC to talk about our proposal and got some good feedback. And it sounds like it's a favorable application. So they're moving forward with that. And the CID is actually proposing to be the lead on the study. So the cities will just be support to that organization that'll run. Then a few things, let's see, as we're preparing the application, we looked back at our 2012 list of accomplishments since that plan and the projects that were identified. And a big piece of that was actually the Deerfield form-based code, getting that implemented, and that covered a lot of the elements that were identified in that work plan. From a infrastructure standpoint, planning our trail connection to Big Creek Greenway, that was a project that was identified that we now have underway in the design stage. And then intersection improvements, McGinnis at Bethany Bend, Webb at Morris, and then the plans for the Morris Road widening. So all those things were listed in the prior plan that we now have underway. There are some other identified transportation projects that we'll be hoping will be looked at through this LCI update. And one of those is a potential new not interchange crossing over 400, since McGinnis is being changed into a full interchange. Creating another kind of local access road over 400 is something we want to look at with that LCI. And then, like Bob said, some of the other outcomes of the study could be the market and branding strategy for the whole area of Windward and Highway 9 and Deerfield. Another strategy for the bus rapid transit, the managed lanes on 400. There's a lot going on there with the state and with the transit authority to get some almost like a toll lane with also access for some form of bus rapid transit with possibly a station at Windward. So all that's gonna be looked at and is currently being planned, and will be part of that as well. So the bus rapid transit, and then looking at making sure we have sidewalk connections from logical points to that area. And finally, an approach to land use and transportation that really changes an area from a vehicular-centered area to make it very walkable. And so that's a big goal of the LCI.
I think maybe, I know we're doing some training and updating and keeping you guys all kind of getting you up to date. So I'm thinking maybe a good idea would be the next meeting, I'll bring in the original LCI study, and maybe we just do a quick page turner for 10, 15 minutes, and I can kind of navigate you through that, kind of get you more familiar with what was done back in 2012 and what the items were and what the emphasis was on. Because, before we change anything, it'd be nice to kind of say, well, where were we as a baseline? And, what targets did we hit? And what targets we didn't hit? And where do you think we should go? And this way we can better understand a clearer direction. So each time you have a monthly meeting, we can come in and spend a few minutes in the beginning or at the end of the meeting and just kind of keep feeding through this so that we kind of keep you all informed and keep getting feedback on what it is. So by the time the study actually gets initiated and started and we sit down with everybody, we sort of have a good broad stroke brush to say, hey, this is what we're looking for. This is what we're looking to achieve. These are the points that we would like to incorporate into the study and get ahead. And then things like land use and architecture isn't the prominent focus of a study like this, but it is incorporated into the study. It will show you land use. It will show you new patterns of development. It will show you where the buildings are placed and those items. So I think that in that sense, we'll be able to get that feedback and then say, okay, this is where we need to be. And we might have to, after the study, like I said, we might have to go back and polish up the form-based code in a sense to incorporate some of those specific ideas. The one thing we have to remember on Deerfield, the whole Deerfield area, is unlike what Alpharetta did, where they went out and just created a development authority. And they said, okay, we're just going to go out and we're going to flow bonds and we're going to buy up the land ourselves. And then we're going to put an RFP out and we're going to hire a contractor to build what we want them to build. The city of Milton hasn't done that. And it's part of the strategic plan that the city manager has. So it's one of those elements, and it's up to the council if they want to entertain that. I mean, there is an expense with that. But for now, what we've been doing for the last 10 years since this LCI is basically trying to get landowners and developers or business owners together. And that's not an easy task because you have to get them kind of put together. And we were pretty successful down here in Crabapple, webbing that cloth. It took us a long time, a lot of years here. And we've been starting to do it there. I'm working with like the Fry's development in Crescent. But we sort of have to weave that and kind of get them to go. So then they go back and do financial negotiations. And I sort of lose touch with that until they come back. So every couple of months they come back and say, okay, Bob, we've made it to the next level. And are you still okay with everything? Sort of, can we still keep moving? I'm like, yes, let's keep moving with it. So it does take a little longer when you do it that way, but we've been pretty successful with it in the past. And if it maintains on that path, we just got to remember it's a redevelopment area. It's not a green field. It's sort of like we have to take an old shopping center, knock it down, because everything's built to some degree, and we're going to have to kind of, redevelop it. It takes a little bit longer to do that. We have to amass properties and things like that. So, but next time I'll bring the LCI study that we did do and show everybody, and then we can talk about it a little bit. And over time, we can get more feedback from you all on what it is you're looking to do, and we can start to develop it. And it is a joint effort internally. So that's why Public Works and ComDev is kind of joining forces, because you can't do one without the other. I mean, if you don't look at the roads, the land patterns don't mean anything. I don't want to take up any more time. So,
Thank you.
Any questions? Or?
A few questions.
Yeah, a couple items. Bob, where is, actually this is more for Sarah, where's the Bethany Bend revamp at Highway 9 on there?
So that was one of the items on the previous plan, was to look at a specific concept for that intersection. And so we did get, the city got federal money to do a scoping study. And at the time, the Highway 9 widening was just ramping up too. So while we ran the public input and the concept alternatives for Bethany Bend at 9, what came out of our deliverable was some shorter term improvements, and the major realignment was worked into the widening. So it is part of that Highway 9 widening project that is currently now scheduled for construction. It's scheduled for construction bid the end of this year. So December of 2022 is when it's supposed to bid for construction.
Okay, great.
Knowing that was coming, just to let you refresh, when we did the architecture of, like, say, Pike's Nursery and the assisted living, we sort of incorporated all those ideas, knowing that the roads would eventually be constructed there. So we sort of, like, now we're doing a dental office on Cogburn, and we got Sarah involved, and she said, geez, I want to do a left turn extension in there. So we've been incorporating all of these transportation elements into the designs of these new facilities with the anticipation that they're coming. So I think that's important too, because we were ahead of the game on that. So we don't have to go back and reconstruct anything that we've constructed.
If City Council approves on March 7th and the application that we make for the funding gets approved, when do we expect that we will have the updated LCI plan completed?
Based on the timeline that ARC published, so the project announcements are in April. They do contracts with the project sponsor in June, and the project work runs from the contract, and everything has to be completed by November of 2023. But we would expect a slightly faster pace than that, but all the details to be worked out. But that's the schedule that ARC has provided.
Bob, on that study, are we, I know there's been discussions with a lot of folks in Highway 9, including commissioners, about we really need to have a corridor look, a design. I mean, we really do need a plan. It's one, we've been talking about this for 10 years.
Yep.
And it has to be incorporated into that study, whether we hire, a TSW, urban planner, but I think we've got to have a consistent look. The complaints on that part, people are adamant and they don't like what we have right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think part of the LCI study, it does show the start of the massing of the structures, how we want to look at the architecture. And then that's why I was saying any modifications to the form-based code, we could certainly do that. I mean, downtown Crabapple has much more restrictive architectural requirements. And they were a little different on the other side. In Deerfield, they were a little bit more relaxed. But I think we could tighten them all up and do a similar thing like we did here and become much more rigid on what specifically what our brand is and what we're looking for. And we can maintain that look along the corridor.
So what can we, I mean, in your opinion, what can we do to go to council or lean on them around, I think this concept of, it's very difficult on Highway 9 because of some of the ownership of those properties. You and I have spoke about this before, right? Some of these are corporate deals on some of these property owners. So, we've got a lot of change getting ready to come up. So I think the bond issue does need to be readdressed. I think we need to talk about it. The time is now.
Yeah. And then the beauty of form-based code is that it is flexible and it allows both the developer to streamline the process, right? They don't have to go for rezonings and things like that. But it also allows staff to streamline our emphasis of what we want. So I don't think we have to wait that long to start implementing some of the change. I think we have some meetings, we hear feedback, and then I'll look at the code and see what flexibility there is. If we need to do any rewrite of the code, we can initiate that sooner to try to achieve that architectural character that you're looking for. I think that's doable. But the LCI would be nice because it ties in transportation, it ties in all the massing. And then with the North Fulton CID, we can even tie in all the projects that we're contemplating right now that are in the concept phase. And we can see how that's all starting to tie in too. Because these are pretty big. I mean, we have a 38-acre development. It's going to be quite a bit of real estate in there. And I think we can start to look at that character early and say, this is what we're looking for. And I think we can achieve that without waiting for the full LCI to be complete. So I think we can get faster results is what I'm saying, which will help.
Also, we're going to have to look at our plan, our comprehensive.
Yep.
Looking at how that then fits in. I'm sure with the timing, we'd probably be in but the 5-year review of that comprehensive plan probably have to be not changed, but
reorganized. And staff has put together, and we will be releasing for public review our initiatives of priorities, how we're putting that together, which projects. We've completed some already, which I call low-hanging fruit. Those were quick. We did them. But they were pretty good. We checked off 5-6 boxes already, which was nice. And we've identified the next 5 or 6 to do. So instead of starting all 40 at once, and not finishing anything. My attitude was, let's do priority. Let's take the ones we know we can do. Let's get right on them and let's complete them. And let's just keep checking boxes so we got them finished. Because unless they're done, it's as if they're not done, right? So we're going to start looking at those and putting those in there. The one thing that we did get out of CPAC was that they didn't really want any major land use changes. So architectural style is different than a land use change. So we can clean up some land use, but there were really no major initiatives on land use changes, which I thought was a good direction. Because I think the land use in and of itself is in pretty good shape. I mean, we have a lot of density there. We have a lot of opportunity. Architecturally, we can polish that up. I think we can do that pretty quick. But from a land use perspective, I don't think we really need to change too much. But out of the LCI, we might, because like we have a new interchange now off of 400. And initially, I was talking to Robin, and she looked at me and said, Bob, 10 years ago, we didn't even contemplate a new interchange. And so the real estate, the land use there was, it'd be appropriate to have more of a commercial establishment around there, right? Because it's a interchange. And it's kind of appropriate to have some commercial activity occur at that. But nobody thought of it back then because it wasn't even there. Having a Highway 9 at 4 lanes, nobody thought of it back 10 years ago. And now it has 4 lanes and a median. And, so the whole concept of how things have developed over the last 10 years is the reason why we need to update this LCI and really look at it holistically. How much more traffic are we going to be getting in from other neighboring, communities and cities and counties? And what impact will that have on our development? And, and then what type of uses? So, the one thing that I did get from like DRB and or as the chair there for many years. But, look, do we really want more car washes? Do we really want more quick lubes? That we were getting hit with a lot of car washes, a lot of, quick lube, oil change places, tire changes. I mean, this is what was coming in from a use perspective. And quite frankly, we were kind of lucky that a lot of those uses were under warrant, which means the community development director can approve or disapprove those uses. And a lot of them, I just told everybody, look, you have to do 100% indoor. You can't have the doors facing the road. You have to have, who's going to want a car wash where the vacuum cleaners are all internal? It's just not feasible. So they ended up going to Forsyth County, and we ended up, skirting a lot of those kind of uses that I think we really didn't want to attract. So we do have the opportunity to pull in more of an office-based use, things that I think you're looking for on the corridor. But that's the kind of discussion I think we need to have holistically with you all to say, look, this is and these are some of the challenges that we've been trying to fight and fend off. So I think that discussion just needs to be had.
Yeah, I think.
Bob, you mentioned the comprehensive plan and the priorities, and you're going to soon be able to share those with us. Is that going to be coming up in a couple of weeks, or are you measuring that in weeks or months? Or
we're doing pretty good with it. Jackie, you here? Yeah, can you give a quick update on where you are with it? Would you mind? She just came to listen, but she is the one putting it together for me.
Well, we
she's doing a good
already,
job with it.
yeah, thank you. Well, we already sort of like structure the document and subdivide them. What are the priorities? Which project are we going to start this year, the following year? So, and I think if we maybe next month we're ready to present.
okay, that'll be good.
Yep.
When you speak about are you talking just about your area, or are you talking about the entirety of the city? And all the other
It's all the
It's all the
departments.
All the
So what we
departments. Oh,
did
nice.
was Jackie and I met with, and we had Steve involved. At each department, we met with each department and went through their list and as well as ComDev's list. And we said, okay, look, here's your list. Which ones do you want to prioritize? Which ones can we handle? Which ones can we do? I think we're doing a lot of it with in-house staff. So, and we certainly have the talent to do that. So we're putting that together, and Jackie made this really nice spreadsheet where she put it together. And then Steve even overlaid the strategic plan because there was some overlap between the strat plan and the comp plan. So he said, look, let's not fight a war on two fronts. Let's put them together and let's see where the overlap is. We don't want to do something on the comp plan that's not achievable or contrary to what he's got on the strategic plan. So we've been putting that all together. So it took us a little time to really formulate that. That's why I grabbed whatever low-hanging fruit I could, if I could use that term, off the list and said, listen, while we're putting that list together and she's compiling everything, let's keep checking things off so we can kind of get as much done as we have to with the time we have. So I think when we come back to you, we'll be able to show you a really comprehensive approach with all the departments, and each department will be doing theirs independently, sort of, but together. So we might be, if ComDev has 3 things, and then economic development has a couple of things, and public works has a few things. There's several projects going on at once, which will all be good. And I guess what I want to tell you tonight is that we're all working together to do that. We're joining up with Sarah and Public Works. I'm working with Greg and Anita on economic development, which I think their big push is going to be on branding. We're really pushing the branding element, and the LCI will address branding as well. So there's a lot of different initiatives around that I think we're really going to be addressing at once. But I'd like to show you the list.
Oh, that's fine.
The list is in the book, but how we're prioritizing.
Right.
The way you said something earlier, I got the sense that you're choreographing this across the entire organization. Is that a correct statement?
It is. I think ComDev can honestly say that we're taking the lead on ensuring that the comp plan, and that's why we put Jackie on to make sure that there's oversight and that there's accountability, and that we're putting together, after we do the priority list, we're going to be putting together project management plans. So each project will have a project management underlying structure to it. Who are the stakeholders? What's the schedule? What are the risks involved? What are we trying to achieve? What's our goal? So once we put those together, then we could really come back and say, this is what it's going to be, and this is our schedule, and this is what we're looking to achieve, so that you get a good comprehensive. It's not just, oh, we're working on it. There's a certain date. We have to show incremental achievement, I think, and that's the way we're going to do it.
Okay, good.
I think it's really good. I think it's going to be a good structured program. I think you'll
We'll
like
look
it.
forward to that.
Bob, I understand the transportation-driven LCI will take until late 2023 to complete. I want to pick up on Laura's concern that we have a number of redevelopments that are pending. The purchase of the Fry's property, the redevelopment that was previously discussed north of Target, that if we don't have a good plan for the look and feel of that and the overall development, and I think there are some buildings turning over on Windward, that we would not have the consistent look that we may want if we wait. So while that is going and it has impacts and consideration on transportation that at a high level you can plan in the redevelopment, I do think we need to focus on that overall redevelopment.
We do. I totally agree. And I think the architectural side of it, being the city architect, I honestly think the code is flexible enough for us to look at and say, this is what's in the code. This is the look and feel of what we're trying to do. And we could show and work with you instead of just kind of guessing what it is. If we need to bring outside help, we can, I'm sure. We could always talk about that. But I think we could just initially discuss what it is you're looking for, so that even if we bring in outside help, it would have to be, I don't want to just bring somebody in and say, oh, we're looking for some look and feel. I want to be able to be very targeted in a contract to say, this is exactly what I'm looking to achieve, and this is what I'm paying you for, and that's the end goal of what I want. In order to do that, I think we need to have some initial discussions. So that's why I'd like to initially show you the old LCI, which kind of sets some tones and massing, and if you look through it, you'll see it's sort of like a mini master plan of developments, how they build out in form-based code, what they look like, just to get everybody kind of familiarized with it. Then I'll show you what proposals and concepts are coming in and how they're somewhat in compliance with that LCI and how they've deviated a little bit from it, like they always do. But we'll look at them together. And then, so then I can extract from you all a better look and feel of what you're looking for me to do and achieve. And then we can put that together.
I think that'd be great, because again,
Yeah.
this is the right time, like you said, with the redevelopment, there's an opportunity there. We want to, and, we'll happy to take you up on your offer next time to come back and
Yep.
inform us and get input and do all that. But, Bob, thank you. Sarah,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Jackie, thank you, guys. I, really appreciate this. And, I once read a book called Hope is Not a Strategy. We can't hope for Milton to be something without all this detail. So I appreciate everybody being patient in the audience too, that has shown up for the other agenda items. But this is important as far as the overall where Milton wants to be or where Milton should be in the next 10 to 20 years. So I appreciate that. Thank you, guys. All right. See, the next agenda item is the approval of the action minutes from January 26, 2022. I think that Robin has sent those out. Any questions, any conversation, any discussions on those?
Move to approve as submitted.
Second?
Okay. Commissioner Judy moves to approve. Commissioner Gilbert seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's easy. That was unanimous. So now the next item, which is probably the reason most people are here. Robin, you want to walk us through this?
I'll start from the beginning. That's what it says. Okay. Okay, welcome to everybody, and thank you to the audience for the patience of going through a discussion of Highway 9, but I think for a lot of you it might be interesting as well, since you're from this part of the city. But at hand tonight, we are going to be discussing U22-01, VC 22-01, Alternative Senior Housing Use Permit from Section 64-1844. So just as far as general information, the applicant is F.H. Schindler, Inc., DBA Mayfield Oaks Senior Living by James Boyle. It contains 1.505 acres on one parcel, and there's an existing single-family residence, as you can see on the slide here. And as stated, it's a request for a use permit for alternative senior housing to serve 15 people and a three-part concurrent variance for the following: to allow 4 handicapped spaces to be in the front of the house, to reduce a 50-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback on northern line to 25 feet, and thirdly, to reduce a 50-foot undisturbed rear buffer to 30 feet. And this is just the location map, just north of some higher density subdivision, and to the west is the not northwest, it's Cogburn Woods Middle School. No, Hopewell Middle School, and Cogburn Woods, I believe, elementary further back. And to the north are scattered larger lots, and further to the northwest is St. Francis private school as well. And to the east is the Hermitage subdivision. So again, within the form-based code, form-based code is the zoning as well as the future land use map. So I get to just have one less map. So that's pretty exciting. So you can see that the subject site is zone T2. And then to the west we call community facilities, which are schools, et cetera. And then to the south is T4, and a little bit further to the south where the daycare center is T4 open. To the south east is, again, I believe that is, had community, I think that's open land. And so there you go. There was an original site plan submitted on December 30th. Basically, it showed septic system in the rear. This was both the primary and secondary field. Just want to note that this area is outside of the sewer map to be served by sanitary sewer, and therefore that's the reasoning of being required to have septic. So just wanted to show you that because it'll change a little bit in the next slide. You can see the green is where the new portion of the proposed facility would be built originally. But then we go to the next slide, which was a revised site plan submitted on February 17th. Based upon some meetings that we'll discuss later on in the presentation, the septic fields primary have been just moved to the center, and then secondary would be on either side of that if needed. And then you'll see that the proposed parking is on the south side as well, and that was changed from a gravel driveway to concrete with some grass in between. So according to the applicant's letter of intent dated December 30th, 2021, he's requesting a use permit for the alternative senior housing facility for a 15-bed home serving seniors 55 and older, needing assistance with activities of daily living supported by 10 full-time equivalent employees within an existing house, 2,500 square feet, to be renovated to comply with Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. And then the existing semi-detached garage and deck will be removed and replaced with approximately 4,100 square foot of residential space connected with the existing home for a total of 6,600 square feet. And the new two-story space will include 15 private suites of approximately 300 square feet with an elevator and dining room. I want to go through the different various meetings we had with public involvement. The Community Zoning Information Meeting on January 25th here at City Hall. And there were approximately 15 residents who attended. Some of the major points that were brought up during that meeting, which, as you all know, is fairly informal. There's a lot of back and forth and discussion amongst the different parties. So location, noise, smell of the septic field and distribution tank near the south property line adjacent to the court at Windward Village subdivision, noting that the applicant has since relocated the primary septic and distribution tank away from the subdivision. Another concern was number of residents proposed of 15. They believe this would be too intense for the 1.5 acre lot. Thirdly, noise of the proposed gravel driveway along the south property line adjacent to the court at Windward. And again, the applicant has since changed the type of material from gravel to pavement for that portion of the southern driveway. Fourth, proximity of the equestrian farm and horses adjacent to the north and east of the property. Fifth, increase in number of EMT fire calls to the property. Our next meeting was February 1st with the City of Milton Design Review Board, and they have a courtesy review. So their points were given to the applicant to gather support from adjacent neighbors on both north and south side. Recommends no gravel driveway. They stated they weren't no objection to rear buffer reduction, the east property line, but for the north support, they would like to see a support letter from adjacent neighbor is highly recommended. Also proposed handicapped parking spots are acceptable in front of the structure. Landscaping or understory hedging is recommended on the south property line. DRB finds that the applicant is asking for numerous concessions to function on this parcel. DRB recommends that minimum variances should be granted to allow this use permit. The DRB recommends a traffic study. I want to note that our Public Works Department did not see that as necessary. It's not required. And the DRB recommends the new project the new building to match the old house for roof building material and style, and DRB rejected proposed concept design. Then another meeting that is held by the applicant on their own is required in our process. It's called a public participation meeting, and the applicant held it on Thursday, February 3rd from 5 to 7 at City Church over on Highway 9. And there was a total of 8 attendees with various concerns that were addressed by the applicant, including the following: a potential dumpster, and the applicant stated no dumpster to be used, just regular residential service. Noise, concern with the noise of the gravel driveway, but would change to a concrete surface near the property line. It would not produce more than 10 to 15 visits per day from families, caregivers, contractors, and deliveries. Lighting, no commercial lighting in place, and any lighting would be facing downward, used for normal residential exterior illumination. Further, buffers on the south property line, applicant willing to work with neighbors. Staff notes that there are no buffers required along the south property line. Concern with future land use in the area, applicant responded by providing the Milton zoning ordinance to show what was permitted in T2 zoning, since that's the majority of the zoning in that area other than the churches and schools. Septic field, applicant stated that the system would be commercial grade with a carbon filtration system to neutralize smells. So we go on to talk about what the city staff comments have been on the subject site and requests. The city arborist states that the T2 Transect zone requires a minimum of 57% coverage or the existing coverage, whichever is less. The applicant has provided a tree survey for specimen trees, and the plan indicates that none of these trees will be removed. In addition, where the undisturbed buffers require additional planting, staff is recommending that it be approved and reviewed by the city arborist. Our development engineer states that the development will be required to submit a land disturbance permit prior to construction of the site if it would be approved. The fire marshal states if gated, a 15-foot wide minimum gate would not switch for fire department access. All portions of the existing and new driveways shall be 14-foot wide minimum and need to meet Americans with Disabilities, ADA requirements, as well as the City of Milton Fire Code regulations, which, just for your information, any kind of commercial building requires a sprinkler. Many jurisdictions have a threshold of up to so much square foot. You don't need a sprinkler system, but City of Milton says it could be a 500 square foot commercial building and you would be required to provide that. So that's just information for your, talk about at a cocktail party or something. I don't know. So anyway, continuing on, Public Works Department, access to the site shall be subject to the approval of Public Works. Frontage improvement shall conform to Chapter 48 streets, sidewalks, and other public places. The site will not require any additional turn lanes on Cogburn Road. Daily trips are estimated at 30. Existing driveway is sufficient from a safety and operations perspective for the proposed use. Continuing on, site distance is adequate. There is more than 500 feet of visibility in both directions from the existing driveway. Fence shall be relocated no closer than 3 feet inside the right-of-way line per zoning regulations. Right now, if you look at the site plan, it's not meeting that requirement. Sidewalk is required based on proximity to a school and is also shown on the site plan. One of the other items that are required for the applicant to fulfill is the environmental site analysis. The full analysis is in your packet, but basically it satisfies the requirement of Section 64-2126, and the applicant has addressed the various issues outlined in the report. And there are no wetlands, floodplains, steep slopes, historical sites, or sensitive plant and animal species. And the applicant has included the tree survey on the site plan. So with use permits, I like to talk about, there's the base zoning, and the base zoning here is T2, okay? And I like to call that the cake. So we're going to talk about the cake itself. And then the use permit is the icing that goes on the cake. And literally it does sit on top of it. It does not take over from T2. It does not replace it. It stays with the cake forever. So it might be a little crusty, but it stays with it. So here are the development standards for a T2 transect zone. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but it does meet all the requirements for the T2 transect zone. There is an additional requirement within the Deerfield form-based code. It's a little different than crabapple, but much of Deerfield came out of what the Highway 9 overlay district required. And so in certain circumstances, buffers are required. And that's why I'm going to start discussing this portion of the report with you now, because it's part of the requirements of the form-based code. So Article 20, Section 2.3.2 states adjacent to a special district, a T2 zone, or a single-family residential use not located within this district, the following shall apply. So because it is adjacent to a T2 zone on the north and the east, that's why the requirement for the concurrent variances. So let's go on. For sites on 4 acres or less, an area of 50-foot wide undisturbed buffer with a 10-foot improvement setback shall be located adjacent to the special district T2 or single-family residential use not located within the district. So the applicant site plan does not comply with the above, therefore the following two-part concurrent variance. So the first one, and it's part two because I'm going in sequence of the way that I'm explaining the case. So please bear with me. So the first one is to reduce a 50-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback on the northern line to 25 feet. So you see the picture here along, it's the north property line. The equestrian fence is basically on the north property line. So it gives you some perspective of where the property lays in that direction. So the site plan shows the driveway at approximately 25 feet from the north property line, and the proposed addition will be outside of the required 25-foot building setback line, but will not be far enough to comply with that required undisturbed buffer. In addition, the septic field is required to be located in the rear and has been placed outside of the reduced undisturbed buffer. The secondary field will be located closer to the south property line. Lastly, the existing small timber walls will be removed along the north property line so that additional buffer can be planted. So if you look at the picture close enough, it's basically those timber walls were just created for parking spaces. There's no reason really for them to exist in the future. So again, every variance, and in our case, a concurrent variance, we need to consider the 4 considerations that's mandated in our zoning ordinance under the appeals section of the code. So I know this is a bit repetitive, but I'm going to go through each request as well as each consideration. The first one is, I'm going to just explain and then the conclusion. The applicant will plant the undisturbed buffer for a minimum of 25 feet, and in some locations will be as wide as 50 feet near the existing structure. In addition, the residence to the north is located approximately 90 feet from the common property line. Therefore, relief, if granted, would not offend the spirit or intent of the zoning ordinance. The requirement for a septic field and the required location based on the type of soils on the site and the need to provide a secondary field are extraordinary and exceptional situation for the site. Based on the revised site plan submitted on February 17th, the proposed undisturbed buffer, if not currently providing a screen, additional plantings will be installed of 25 feet and up to 50 feet in some locations along the north property line would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. And lastly, the revised site plan indicates where the undisturbed buffer will be planted in some locations meet the 50-foot requirement. Therefore, the public safety, health, and welfare are secured and that substantial justice is done. And based on the evaluation of the request, staff recommends approval conditional of Part 2, VC 22-01. So we're going to go on to the second part of the buffer variance, and that is to requests to reduce a 50-foot undisturbed rear buffer to 30 feet. The applicant is requesting this reduction of the buffer based on the required location of the septic drain fields in the rear of the property. So I just want to point out, I did a little blow up of, this is the 30 feet right here. And then that you can see the different trees that are identified. And then this would be the 50-foot undisturbed buffer area. So obviously there is the septic fields. And just from an aerial, this is approximately the 30 feet width of the existing vegetation and trees along the east property line. So the intent of an undisturbed buffer is to provide protection to adjacent properties for the proposed alternative senior housing. The existing stand of hardwoods, along with additional understory plantings, will provide sufficient screening for the adjacent property. In addition, the parking area and structures for the senior housing are located a minimum of 100 feet from the rear east property line. Therefore, relief, if granted, would not offend the spirit or intent of the zoning ordinance. The requirement for a septic field and the required location based on the type of soils on the site and the need to provide a secondary field or extraordinary and exceptional situation for the site. Based on the revised site plan submitted February 17th, the proposed undisturbed buffer of 30 feet to be supplemented with understory vegetation will provide adequate screening to the east, would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. And lastly, based on the revised site plan on February 17th, the proposed undisturbed buffer of 30 feet to be supplemented with understory vegetation will provide adequate screening to the east, would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. I'm sorry. I should say that the public safety, health, and welfare are secured and substantial justice is done. So it was basically the same reasoning for the fourth consideration. And based on the evaluation of the request, staff recommends approval conditional of Part 3, VC 2201. So now we're going to go into the actual development regulations, talking about the actual use permit. So that's the icing on the cake, so to speak. So this is an alternative senior housing use permit, and it means any dwelling, whether operated for profit or not, which undertakes through its ownership or management to provide or arrange for the provision of housing, food service, and one or more personal services for two or more adults who are not related to the owner or administrator by blood or marriage. Personal services includes, but is not limited to, individual assistance with or supervision of self-administered medication, assistance with ambulation and transfer, and essential activities of daily living such as eating, bathing, grooming, dressing, and toileting. So there's many development standards within this use permit, and they comply with all of them except for one. So that's highlighted here on this table. And it is the location of parking shall be located to the side and rear of the principal structure, but outside minimum building setbacks or inside a garage. And therefore, the 4 handicap parking spaces are in front of the main structure and the need for a concurrent variance. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about that right now. So as you can see on this blown up site plan, there are 4 handicap parking spaces in the front, and the 6 remaining parking spaces are further to the east in the rear of the new structure. So the intent of this requirement is for parking not to be seen from the street and to provide a pleasing view of the site. The parking in front of the building is located 140 feet from Cogburn Road, as well as there are trees along Cogburn that will help ameliorate the view of the parking in the front. Therefore, relief, if granted, would not offend the spirit or intent of the zoning. There's the need to provide access for residents and their visitors on the property is an extraordinary and exceptional situation for the site. Based on the location of the parking, 140 feet from Cogburn Road and the additional vegetation along Cogburn provides and ameliorates the view of the parking and would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. And lastly, again, based on those same reasons, the public safety, health, and welfare are secured and that substantial justice is done. And based on the evaluation of the request, staff recommends approval conditional Part 1, BC 2201. So we have looked at the zoning, the base zoning. We've looked at the considerations or the development regulations for the use permit. And then another part that we need to look at and is required by the zoning ordinance is to walk through use permit considerations. So there are 10 of them that we look at, and it's on a case-by-case basis for each request. So the first one is whether the proposed use is consistent with the land use or economic development plans adopted by the mayor and city council. The proposed development is located in the T2 land use category on the City of Milton 2040 Comprehensive Plan map in the Deerfield Form-Based Code. The proposed use permit for an alternative senior housing is permitted within the T2 Transect zone. In addition, the adopted 2040 Comprehensive Plan states the following policy: we will accommodate our diverse population by encouraging a compatible mixture of housing types, densities, and costs within the city. In addition, one of the issues identified in the plan was, quote, current development patterns do not consider senior housing and its proximity to senior services, unquote. Further, staff notes that this location is within 1/2 mile of the Alpharetta Adult Activity Center, which is open to Milton residents and at the same costs as Alpharetta residents. So I checked that with our Parks and Rec director. In addition, it is in close proximity to various shopping centers and restaurants for use by the residents. Number 2, compatibility with land uses and zoning districts in the vicinity of the property for which the use permit is proposed. The site is compatible with the adjacent nearby land uses and zoning, which include a mix of institutional uses and both low and higher density residential. The property to the north and east is Zone T2, developed with a single-family residence and horse farm. Further to the east is the Hermitage subdivision, Zone T2, with minimum 1-acre lots. To the south is Zone T4, developed with the Courts at Windward subdivision with single-family homes on minimum 4,000 square foot lots. And in addition, there's also a required 40-foot buffer on the north side of that subdivision along the common property line with the subject site. And to the west is designated as community facilities with Cogburn Woods Middle School and St. Francis High School. 3, whether the proposed use may violate local, state, and or federal statutes, ordinances, or regulations governing land development. The proposed use does not appear to violate any ordinances or regulations governing land and development if the concurrent variances are approved. The effect of the proposed use on traffic flow, vehicular and pedestrian along adjoining streets. Based on the type of use and scale of the proposed senior housing, there will be minimal impact on the traffic flow, vehicular and pedestrian on Cogburn Road. No additional road improvements will be required, such as a turn lane or deceleration lane to access the property. Number 5, the off-street parking is located to the side and behind the existing structure, but there are 4 handicap spaces located in the front. A concurrent variance is being requested to allow the handicap parking to be located there. Per the zoning ordinance, parking shall be located to the side and rear of the principal structure. That is the zoning ordinance that speaks to the use permit specifically, but outside minimum building setbacks or inside a garage. Below is a table indicating the required and provided number of parking for the site. So the requirement is 1 parking space per 2 beds and 1 parking space per 2 employees, including the owner operator. So there's 15 beds, can't really split a parking spot. So up to 8 parking spaces and 3 employees at any one time on the property. at the most is 2 parking spaces. And the total required is 10, and the total provided is 10, of which 4 are handicapped. The T2 Transect zone allows a maximum of 20% lot coverage. The parcel has 10,589 square feet, or 16.15% of lot coverage, which meets this requirement. So lot coverage is the area of the building, which I just realized I get it confused with other parts of the zoning ordinance, and actually technically it would be even less than this 16.15, as this was calculated with all impervious surfaces. So it definitely meets that requirement for lot coverage. A protective screening, although the application does not meet the minimum requirements for undisturbed buffers along the north and east property lines, there will be adequate screening provided as discussed under the concurrent variances above. Hours and manner of operation will be 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. The applicant's letter of intent states that there are 3 shifts that cover 24 hours. There are 2 shifts of 3 staff during the day and 1 staff member during the night shift. The applicant has replaced gravel for the driveway along the south property line with pavement in order to reduce the potential noise to the residents of the courts at Windward subdivision. The applicant has not indicated additional lighting on the site. There is 1 streetlight type fixture adjacent to the north property line. If lighting is proposed, it must comply with the section 4.12 of the Deerfield Form-Based Code, which requires light fixtures to have the light cut off below 90 degrees and the beam shall be cut off at 75 degrees, as well as other regulations that limit light pollution. And lastly, the applicant has 1 existing curb cut onto Cogburn Road. Public Works has stated that the location of the curb cut does meet required vertical site distance. The number of trips that the use produces does not require any additional road improvements, such as a turn lane or decel lane. So in conclusion, the proposed development of the alternative senior housing use permit is consistent with the City of Milton 2040 comprehensive plan and map, and consistent with the use permit considerations. The proposal also provides additional choices for housing for the over 55 population within the city. Therefore, staff recommends approval conditional of U2201. In addition, staff recommends approval conditional of VC 22, parts 1 through 3. So with the meat of the staff report done, the next area is the recommended conditions. If you so choose to approve it, it would be approved for a use permit for an alternative senior living facility. And these are the proposed conditions. To the owner's agreement to restrict the use of the property as follows: to that of an alternative senior living facility. B, restrict the total square footage of the structures, including the 2,500 square foot primary existing residence and the proposed 4,121 square foot structure to a maximum total of 6,621 square feet. Restrict the maximum number of residents of the alternative senior living facility to 15, and the maximum building height shall be 2 stories. So the form-based code dictates how that is measured for the 2 stories. So that's why I don't have a specific foot height on it. And then the second, to the owner's agreement to abide by the following: basically substantial compliance with the revised site plan received on February 17th. I'm not going to go through all of that, but you can read it, but basically stating that it needs to meet the conditions, and only the site plan may be revised with the approval of the community development director in order to comply with city codes and zoning conditions. And for number 3, to the owner's agreement to the following site development considerations: access to the site and frontage improvement shall be subject to the approval of the City of Milton Public Works, and needing to meet Chapter 48 as well. And number 4, to the owner's agreement to abide by the following: a stormwater management concept plan shall be submitted and approved by the Community Development Department prior to the submission of a land disturbance permit. So for y'all who've been around for a while, this is a little different how I'm presenting this, but this is how we end up presenting it to council, is separating the concurrent variance request away from the conditions of zoning. per our city attorney's advice. And so that's why it looks a little different. So these are dealing with the conditions for the concurrent variances. 1, to allow 4 handicap spaces to be in the front of the house as shown on this revised site plan submitted on February 17th. Number 2, to reduce a 50-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback on the northern property line to 25 feet, and where possible, to plant the undisturbed buffer 25 feet as shown on the revised site plan on February 17th, 2022. And 3, to reduce a 50-foot undisturbed rear buffer east property line to 30 feet as shown on the revised site plan submitted February 17th, and provide additional plantings to the existing buffer as required by the city arborist. So that concludes our presentation of the requested use permit. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have before the applicant comes up to.
Can we go through that again?
Sure. You want to go to sleep? You have some insomnia?
Anybody have any questions for staff right now?
I do, and Judy does, I think. Judy, you want to go first?
So one of your statements in your presentation was that a request for 4 handicap spots in the front, but when I look at the site plan, I only see 2 spaces designated
So
as handicap.
I think it's not identified, but the concurrent variance calls out for 4 handicap spots. And I talked to the applicant about that. So I couldn't change and say, oh, I needed to meet the letter of the law. So the applicant is in agreement to have all 4 of them to be handicapped.
And that meets any ADA
Yeah,
requirements?
more than enough, yes.
That point, that expansion would have to be greater.
So my
Got to
understanding,
change, they have to have access for openings on the sides of the,
so there's already 2 openings for van accessible. So the
And
other
that.
2,
if you count the number of spaces, then you're going to make 4 of those.
Mhm.
You're going to have to expand that amount of space.
so my understanding is that not all of those spaces have to be handicap accessible. But obviously if, when we get to plan review and with the fire marshal who handles the ADA, then it can be accommodated, so.
So for the parking spaces though, is there, aside from the 10, are there any other parking spaces going to be on the property for visitors or?
That's all of them is the 10, no.
So so if other visitors, family members, whoever comes, those 10, I mean, is that going to be enough?
You can speak to the applicant about that. That's what they've submitted.
Got it, okay. And then the other question I had about the parking spaces is that I know you calculated 10 is required, but does that 10 requirement also factor in the fact that 4 are going to be handicap spaces?
It's a total, yes.
So if 4 are handicapped and
6.
they're not used, let's just say, and now you only have 6
Right.
for employees and staff, then what?
Yeah. Well, you can speak to the applicant because they know the operations, but that
But
is
from
what they
from a
propose.
requirement standpoint,
It doesn't speak to
say
how
10.
many has to be handicapped and how many has to be regular,
so the
so.
10 includes the fact that some could be handicapped
Correct.
and some could be not.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I would add to that. So what are we basing the calculation on? That's kind of what I
So
want to
it's,
know.
so this is what the ordinance requires. That's right here on your monitor. So it requires 1 parking space per 2 beds and 1 parking space per 2 employees, including the owner operator.
Okay. But then I'm going to go back to what Smeet said, and that, I mean, we're missing like a whole slew of people coming in and out of here, and where are we accounting for those, I guess?
Well, I would allow the applicant to answer that question because he has a better
Okay.
idea of the operation of his business, so.
Okay. A couple other questions. So what is the max number of units supported by because I saw we had a primary and a secondary septic field, one septic field versus two. Because we've got primary and secondary is what I'm seeing proposed. So what are the max number of units that you could have that would be supported by one?
Well, if it was approved and the health department and the applicant has worked with soil scientists, and the primary would serve all 15 of them, all 15, the maximum need, because we base it on bedrooms.
Right.
So, it's already been designed that the primary would meet the requirements of that.
So why is there a secondary?
So there's always
on
a
there?
second,
That's
okay,
weird.
I'm sorry. So Fulton County Health Department requires that every septic system have a primary and secondary, and the secondary is there in case if for some bizarre reason the entire system fails.
Okay.
Okay, and so let's say if the soils are inundated or something happens that they can no longer percolate in that area, they have a secondary area to put the septic lines in. So that's every single lot in the city of Milton, that we permit has a primary and secondary. That's required by the health department.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. And then on the trip counts that I saw, did those come from our, public
It
transportation?
did, yeah.
Okay, and what were we basing those counts on? I guess I'm just trying to understand.
So basically, if for a smaller use like this, they look at the use and they have this wonderful International Transportation Engineers book, and they look at it and they look at the use and the number of occupants, and then that gives them the number of trips. So it's not like they went out and did a traffic study and, figured out that wasn't necessary for this size of a development.
Okay.
But it comes from International Transportation Engineers Handbook.
And then I guess a question I have, this is more on the transportation side. I didn't see where is their turnaround for EMT, fire, and ambulance? It looks pretty tight in there. Usually there's got to be turnaround capability.
So this was reviewed by the fire marshal with this site plan, and so he saw that as acceptable, the way that the existing and proposed driveways were configured, so.
It seemed fairly tight, but okay. And then there's a reference in here to the Economic Development Plan, T2. I guess, what plan is that? I'm not familiar with it, but
I mean, that's just, you could compare it to it. I do believe there's a portion of the comprehensive plan that has an economic arm to it. So
is it for that area, I guess, for that, or is it the whole plan?
Just the general.
Okay,
yeah.
it's a general plan.
Economic,
That's all I want. I'm
Yeah.
just clarifying because I saw it and I'm like, is that the big plan or is that
Yeah,
a
it
piece
would
of
have
the
been
plan?
an element within the comprehensive plan, so.
Okay. I think that covers it.
And I just had one other, just in regards to the whole land use and zoning. So I know you had mentioned that this area included a mix of institutional uses, both low and high density residential. So for this, where are you characterizing this use permit to be? And which one of those?
So it would be T2. So this is the
I know
T2.
T2, but like, you're saying institutional uses in low and high density residential?
So this community facilities, this is St. Francis right here.
Mhm.
And then the middle school is to the, want me to talk anymore? Okay. Is down to the southwest. So that I would call that those were the institutional, what I call institutional uses, this community facilities. I will say that I believe that there is one single family house that's operating by an individual, but St. Francis has most of the land, the rest of the land around there where it's blue, or the public schools. So the higher density would be the T4, where you see the Regent's Trace and the Glasson Way. And then the low density is the T2, which is the scattered larger lots. And then this is the backside of the Hermitage, which is a platted subdivision that comes off of Cogburn further to the north. And that is zone T2, and that is also unsewered, and they are on septic as well.
But this is, I mean, this is not institutional. That's why I'm trying to understand, like institutional, I get like schools or whatever across the street. But this is T2, which is low density.
Right, I said that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So so this would be considered low density?
Yes, because in the form-based code, the minimum lot size is 1 acre. And it can't even be a flag lot. It has to have a full 100 feet of width. So it's a little more restrictive than the traditional AG1, but it's really the analogous to the AG1. So there were areas on the map that were already AG1 that we chose to want to preserve that 1 acre minimum. And so anything that's in that bright green is a T2.
Okay, but I mean, again, low density, but you have, at least at this point in a proposed plan, 10 parking spaces, 15 plus how many ever employees, that's still considered low density?
I mean, the use permit is meant to look at each parcel individually, but, obviously it's, if it's a 6 or 7 or 6,500 square foot house, I would say the structure itself is probably not, I mean, there's smaller houses, but there's bigger houses. Like the structure itself is no bigger than what an individual lot may be. So as with the 15 residents, if they, in my conclusion, I saw it would be appropriate based upon, the location of it adjacent to a higher density and with institutional across the street. So.
Robin, other than single-family residential, what other types of uses are permitted in T2 in Deerfield?
So
That
if I
would be
had that
relevant?
email that I sent you, I have to look.
I
There's not very
actually
many.
have it. It's right here.
There's not very many.
That's what you gave us.
So there's 2 areas that you can look at what something is permitted in T2. It would be the chart, the big chart, and so I don't have that right here, but the uses that can be applied that are allowed in T2 are aircraft landing area, amateur radio antenna exceeding the permit height, daycare facility, recreational field, school, private or special, senior housing. So let me just clarify the senior housing. I know there's a little, that's only in areas that have sewer. Okay, so it wouldn't necessarily apply for this spot. Stadium associated with private school, artist studio, and alternative senior housing. So that is that. And as far as the T2 table, I have to look it up. So, oh, thank you. Yeah.
Robin, I think you had stated before that the variants stay with the property, not the use. So once a variance is granted on a setback, that stays with the property? Is that?
So variance is, so if, let's say for some bizarre reason, the applicant does not occupy this and does not start the business, and in 36 months, the variances go away. The use permit stays with the property, but the variances expire after 36 months if they're not used.
But if a subsequent purchaser of the property sought to purchase this property and use it for a different use, the setbacks, the 25 feet from the side and the 50 feet from the back, or the 30 feet from the back would stay?
So those are buffers. The setbacks are the underlying setbacks of
Okay.
T2, which are 25 side, 50 rear, and 60 front.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
But the use permit, it's going to stay the use permit, correct?
Correct. It stays with the land in perpetuity.
Right.
Right.
So it
But in
can't be
our-
something else. It has to
Sorry?
be whatever the use permit is for,
Right.
correct, legally?
Right,
If
but you
it's
don't have
approved.
to use the use permit. I mean, it can be on the property. We have a few properties out there that were granted use permits have never been used, or they were used for a while and then they closed up. So, yeah, so did that answer your question or statement?
Yeah, I just want to make sure it was clear because I think there might have been confusion, so.
Okay, so use permits stay with the property, concurrent variances or even variances expire. They're all one and the same.
As long as they're not used.
I'm sorry.
As long as they're not used, they do stay with the property once
Right.
they're
They are.
Yeah.
activated.
And there is a caveat in the ordinance. Let's say if somebody's building, a structure that is associated that needed the variances and they're having problems with building it, they can ask for an extension and it could be granted to them based upon their, situation. So, yeah.
So the
You.
reduction of the 50-foot undisturbed buffer is being driven by three things: septic field, the driveway, and the new structure, or just the
Oh,
new
yeah,
structure?
that's true. I mean, not the 30-foot, not so much the structure. The east property line is more driven by the septic system.
Mm-hmm.
The north property line is driven by the building. Basically, it's the building because the building's 25 feet away at least, but it's not 50 feet away from the north property line.
Right. Do you know how far, not counting the garage, how far the existing two-story house is from the north property line? It
I'd
looks
have
like
to
it's
look at
over
the-
50 feet.
I'd have to look at it. 42 feet.
No, not the proposed, the existing house.
Existing.
No, I think that's,
existing is 40.
it's 42 feet, yeah. So we have the site plan and
Oh, I'm not talking about the garage. Excluding the garage, how far is what's listed here as existing two-story house? That
oh,
looks
the
to be-
house.
The house itself looks
house.
to be more than,
It's more than four, because it's a little further south than the existing
More
garage,
than-
so,
yeah.
yeah.
So is it possible under our codes for this area to add the addition in the front of the house as long as it's behind the 60-foot?
It could be, yes. Yep.
So it is possible that if they chose to, they could put the addition on the front of the house and then put this parking on the south side and rear.
Correct. If it worked for them. From a zoning perspective, yes, they could do that. So we'll go back to your question about the allowable uses by right in R2 is a house, an accessory unit, like a guest house. Use permit, bed and breakfast inn, I must have, I don't think that was on my list. Open market structure by rights, and then we go down to a bus shelter, fountain or public art, outdoor auditorium by warrants. I think we talked about churches with a use permit, grain storage by right, livestock pen with a warrant, greenhouse by right, a stable by right. That's a personal greenhouse. I mean, it's not, fire station by right, a use permit for a cemetery, a college, all the educational items would need a use permit, college, high school, trade school, elementary school, water supply facility by warrant, electric substation by warrant, and that's it.
Robin, back to Judy's comment. Paper to reverse this. House. There an ordinance that something not be built front of.
So that speaks to, a lot of times we deal with things in AG1 and all that would be a guest house or accessory structure. But if they were to build a structure and then connect it, it would become one structure. So
So it wouldn't
yeah.
affect that. Okay.
I mean, if there was, and actually you're allowed to have an accessory structure, but I would assume they would, even if you did a breezeway connecting it, it would consider to be one.
Pass.
Yeah.
Got a question, just building on this, the septic part, because the single-family home has a septic there now, of course.
Correct.
Do we know the size of that septic versus the size of the proposed septic?
You'll have to ask the applicant, but I'm not sure if they have that information because it's a fairly old.
I'm sure septics, I don't know this for a fact, but septics are designed by number of bathrooms or residents, is that correct?
It's by bedrooms.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Else have any questions for staff?
Come on, I need some more questions.
Careful what you ask.
Exactly.
So,
Okay.
all right.
Allow you to return.
Okay.
Thank you, Robin.
Mhm.
So now the applicant, Mr. Boyle. And then, like you said, you got,
So I'm going to ask for your, for first time I've been in front of a planning commission, so it's a new experience. I'm learning as we go along.
could you please state your
so-
name and, can you please state your name and address?
Yeah, sure. My name is Jim Boyle, James Boyle in the application. My wife and I are residents of Milton. We live at 13935 Bellaterre, nearby to this facility. We are currently, I hope you can see my presentation. There you go. Okay. So we've been residents of Milton since 2015. We own a place that you may be familiar with. It's called Mayfield Oaks. It's in Alpharetta. It's right next to the Arts Center. And you can see a picture of that home on the left. We're under contract to purchase 13,275. Really, my wife and I's life, we changed and we're committed to senior living. I mean, that's, I can tell you a much longer story, but as you know, we're requesting the use permit. One of the things we looked into, and Robin commented on some excerpts of the comprehensive plan. The Milton 2040 comprehensive plan clearly states that Milton needs additional senior living beds, and not wasting your time, but there's a number of different sections highlighted in the comprehensive plan that says senior living beds are in fact needed. One of the things that from our perspective, we think is important is, as residents of Milton, we certainly understand or have a sense of and want to maintain and sustain the Milton character, the rural character. You can see there are two assisted living facilities servicing Milton today. They're both within a mile and a half, 2 miles. They're large facilities, more than 200 beds. The reality is that there is very big demand for what's codified in Milton code called this alternative senior living. People don't want to go, there's a large number of folks that want to stay in a single family kind of environment. And while 15 seems like a lot, and I'll talk about that in a second, the reality is it is a single family house. And I'll give you some examples of that. Why Cogburn Road? Well, you heard about and you guys know Cogburn Road, but the institutional nature, of the area. We like that we're close to schools and close to communities. We don't want to have an adverse impact. We could apply for a use permit in a subdivision, but that's not going to be the right thing for the subdivision. But on a road such as this, where there's pretty good, traffic and so on, we think it's good. We like the proximity to the adult center. We like the fact that there's a similarly licensed home about 3/4 of a mile to the north, which is a home for adults with developmental disabilities. That's at 13,665. You can see a picture of that here. So if we look specifically about Cogburn Road, really our request is to establish a home in a residential setting. I'm not going to go through the plan unless you have specific questions about that. But I want to talk about the main community points that we heard. There were 4 points that came out of the different public meetings as well as private meetings that we've had with nearby neighbors. And those 4 points were noise, lights, traffic, and concerns about system smell or septic system smell. One of the first things we did is, look, we want to be really good neighbors, and the lady isn't here, but we own and operate a 15-bed residential home just like this, and we've got great relationships with our neighbors, and I'm sure those who are even going to speak in opposition to it can comment. We had the next door neighbor for our place in Alpharetta come and speak at one of the public meetings. We don't create noise. Old folks, they go to bed at 8:30. I mean, we're not a noise creating thing, but there was some concerns about gravel driveway and proximity to houses, so we've worked to address that. Additionally, the existence of existing buffers and landscape buffers mitigate some of the concerns. All the lighting in the property, it's purely going to be residential in nature. You will see at the end of my presentation, I'm going to show you some pictures of Mayfield. I want the folks that live here to think of this as the house that they raised their kids in. The only difference is that they're no longer physically or cognitively capable of living in a home by their own, and they don't want to go into some big facility. They want to live in a house, but they need care. And so the place looks and feels like a house. All the lighting will be residential in nature. There were some questions, and I'll respond to the questions that you guys have about traffic, but you have an estimate from the city staff about site visits, 30 from a traffic engineer. We would guess 15, I mean, just based on our existing operation. And the reality is we've got staff that comes, and then you'll have a visiting doctor or nurse, and then family. And I would love to tell you the family is there every day. Unfortunately, they're not. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So we can talk about that a little bit more. In terms of system smell, last thing there's a horse farm, and I think we'll probably smell the horses more than we're going to smell the septic system. But I don't want a septic system that has a smell. We're going to, it's going to be a properly maintained system, and if we will do what's necessary to address that, and we moved it. There's two other elements in the 2040 comprehensive plan that I want to point out. We're fully supporting the urban growth boundary. The properties to the south of us are on septic, or sewered. We're able to do this on septic. There was some discussion about fields, primary and secondary. The code requires that it's sized based on the number of beds. So we had a soil engineer do a calculation. How many feet of septic lines do you have to support the number of beds? And then the code says you have to have, I'm not an engineer, but you have to have this much space. And then in case that goes bad, you've got to have enough space on the property to put in a secondary field. And so that space exists. And so that original site plan, we got a little carried away and drew lines everywhere. That was way more septic field than's necessary. That was showing both the primary field, and if we were to put a secondary field in, if we had to do that in the future, what that would be. There would not be a situation where you have a primary field and a secondary field both installed, both in operation. It's just the secondary is a backup. But so anyway, we're supporting the urban growth boundary, certainly identified as a priority, and we do want to protect from urban spread within the area. But second, this area is a sidewalk priority area. We'd be adding 140 feet of sidewalk, in a zone. So certainly we feel like we would be supporting the character of that Milton is hoping to sustain. Let me tell you about a senior living home just quickly, because you see big box places. I mean, they're easy to spot. It's much harder to spot the personal care homes. Milton actually doesn't have a lot of them. You'll see more in Alpharetta. And so on. But we've owned this since 2013. We operated on 1.7 acres. We have a staffing ratio which really makes this kind of use unique. We have a staffing ratio of 1 caregiver for each 5 residents. You may ask, why 15? It's simply because I want to have 3 staff members there for safety purposes. If somebody's on break, I want 2 folks to be able to take care of issues. That's how we get to our sizing. But so big box places, staffing ratio is 1 to 15. We're 1 to 5. So we're a different kind of care environment. We have 100% occupancy. We have had for a number of years. In fact, we've got several people from Milton living in the facility. there's just a demand for residential senior living. And I assume that's why Milton passed the code for this alternative senior living. Here's a picture of front and back of Mayfield. We would use that basically as the proxy for what we're trying to establish. It's a house. Yes, it's a big house. It's 6,600 square foot footprint, but it's not bigger than other places that you'll find in Milton. Very, very residential in character. Take a look at the inside of the facility. It's a house. So with that, I'll pause. And I don't know if I take questions now or you want to hear from opposition or how you guys work.
I'll get to questions.
Yeah. In your presentation, I seem to pick up that you do not own the property currently. Is that correct?
That's correct. We have a contract to purchase, and that contract is contingent upon, so the property is for sale. We have a contract to purchase, and it's contingent upon getting relevant approvals.
Jim, how was it that you chose this parcel?
I'm sorry?
Why did you choose this parcel?
Great question. So if we look at our existing property in Alpharetta, we want to be in a place where it's residential in nature, because we want people to, we don't want them to be in a commercial kind of place. But we also know, I mean, legally, I could apply for a place in the middle of a subdivision, but we're not the right thing for a subdivision. I mean, so we're looking for a place that's on a fairly busy road, which reasonably isolated lot. So that was those are the kind of lots that we're looking for. So not in the middle of a subdivision, but outside of a subdivision. And then we want a place that's close to kind of community stuff. We have an elementary school, Alpharetta Elementary, pre-COVID. The kids would come up they would trick or treat at the house we want to be in that kind of proximity to school. So this school zone of Cogburn is fantastic. And we feel like with the buffering between the high density 8 houses to an acre just to the south of us and our property, it's a single family house. Yeah, there's going to be, 6,600 square foot house, but it's a good buffer to the other properties to the north.
You used the word buffer. That's one of the things we're talking about tonight,
Of course,
right?
yeah.
And have you, and I believe Judy and perhaps Laura as well, raised questions about positioning of the house and the addition to the house and so forth. Have you tried to position what you want to construct here within the buffers and within the code?
We have. We've played around quite a bit to try to figure out, how do we get the layout? And so it's a balance of, there's areas that'll perk, there's areas that won't perk, there's areas that are buildable. You don't want to build on the land that'll perk, and so on. So we have looked at different configurations. Where we landed was the design that you guys see, or at least the site plan, has the same frontal view from Cogburn Road, tomorrow if you approve this, as it has today. And so that's what we looked at, that we kind of went in that direction. Did we study in detail putting the addition on the front of the house? We did not. And the reason we did not is because, it's a single family house. We want, living room and dining room and kitchen and residential kitchen. So you go into the front of a house and it just, it would require, I think from a capital standpoint, it would require a complete rework. What's being added is bedrooms. And they're being added to the back of the house and yeah.
So what I heard you say there at the end was you considered alternatives, which may have been compliant with the buffers and setbacks and so forth, but it was not either workable and you mentioned capital budget, so
Sure.
it was not
didn't
a reasonable economic proposition.
We did not financially evaluate. It wasn't a main consideration to put things in the front. I can come back to that. We looked at the existing footprint and said, okay, what makes sense? Came up with one design, tried to understand and respect the buffers. The lot is 142 feet wide. 50-foot buffer, where is that going to mean? What's that going to mean in terms of placement? And so evaluation was to minimize the impact on any of the buffers.
Well, minimizing the impact on buffers, on one side, you're taking more than half of it, as I recall, and in the rear, it's about 40% that you're taking away. So you may have minimized it, but it's still a big chunk of buffers and setbacks that you have taken for other purposes.
May I address that?
Please.
And let me just get to a slide. So if you look on the north side, so when we look at buffers, we looked at existing structure within the buffers. I'm not a civil engineer, but we looked and said, okay, there's a driveway there, there's retaining walls there, there's parking there, there's a garage there. So and so the existing structure, there is no buffer requirement unless you grant a use permit. It's when you grant a use permit that the 50-foot buffer requirement comes in. So the existing structure isn't in conflict with the buffer, except when you then create, right? So we looked and said, okay, how can we clean that up? And that's been an iterative process. And so the cut, the curb cut, it's within that buffer. Our intention is we bring the driveway out of the buffer, basically as soon as is practical. We remove all of the parking, the gravel, the structure, which is existing there, protect the one specimen tree. So basically reestablish, a buffer. But the problem with that, me saying that, is that there's not a buffer requirement prior to getting this use permit, but replanting it, planting, relevant understory, vegetation and so on, getting rid of a good portion of gravel and so on. And then any building we would do would be actually, if you look at where the garage marked in the bricks, so that's where the structure exists, and you'll see that anything that we would build would be further away from the buffer. So it may not be the logic that you guys are looking at, but my logic is that there's existing structure, whether it's driveway or whatever. We'll take as much of that out as is practical and build outside of that buffer.
Jim, it was apparent that you were doing that just from reading the presentation. Although where I am at the moment, notwithstanding your good efforts in this regard, we're still taking 50% here and 40% over there, and it seems like you're putting a lot on this particular parcel of land.
One comment about the back, the reduction in buffer, my words, and it's probably not correct, but it's a technical reduction. We're not going to be planting, we're not going to be building anything in the rear buffer. It's open septic field. It's open field today, and it would remain open field. But thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of follow along with Ron, and I spent time looking at Design Review Board and their comments, and I came from that board. So I think variances are problematic. They're not good. We really should avoid them. And I know Design Review Board is very, very much stuck on that, as well as making recommendations to the BZA. And I would have to agree with them. I think, I don't know who your architect is, but my advice would be there are ways to rework this, definitely. And Judy's recommendation on the front, actually, I think architecturally can work. The way the design looks right now that I see, the DRB is probably not going to approve that currently.
That design, the front elevation that you saw, that's no longer on the table. We got that feedback. That's when we reworked the site plan.
Yeah, I definitely. So that's a good thing. But I think agreeing with Ron on the variances, there are opportunities here to rework this, and I think in a way that it's not gonna bust your budget, sort of thing. Because I actually think the way you had it, where it was separated, that actually may be worse from a from a cost perspective. So, I mean, I run a business, so I'm understanding your dilemma there. So I would definitely find a way, if you can, to look at the option of building off the front and possibly moving the parking to the back, and then the handicap to the side, which gives those folks access, which I did hear those comments during the DRB.
That's an ADA. I mean,
It's important, though. I would agree. If you're going to run that type of
that's-
facility, you got to have
exactly.
it.
The handicap parking simply has
You
to
have
be
to have it.
the shortest distance to the entrance. I mean,
Right.
That's a.
So I think there's ways to avoid the variances and to keep the opportunity to have the separation. And I think that needs to be addressed and looked at, because that was one of the things I saw that, like Ron, it really stands out. Variances for me, I don't like them. I just think there's a better way to look at a problem and see if there's a bit different way to solve it. If you really want to move forward with this project, which I think you do. The other question I have for you, you know, I know you're still you're still looking at designs and all that, but I didn't see the landscape addressed yet. I understand you still have a ways to go. I would definitely look at that, because comments I saw around view shed and having additional plantings, I think those are going to be really important here. I would definitely, with your architect, designer, look at what, if you can move this around, what are you going to do to address the other homeowner concerns and the person who's in that property next to you, because I know that was another item. And then I do want to get back to the trip count discussion and the parking spaces. So I guess on the parking, I'd like to hear from you. What do you see? I have experiences with these sort of living conditions due to family members, unfortunately. So I have been at facilities like this in and out, and I've just watched the traffic flow. So I guess I'd like to hear from you. What do you see a day in the life of this facility? Who's coming? Who's going?
Sure.
When are they coming? When are they going?
Sure.
And what does that look like by total people?
Yeah. So you can't calculate this way, but I'm just going to be transparent and so typically we have 2 or 3 cars in parked on the property from employees, and that's it. Sometimes the employees ride together, so sometimes it's 2, it's not 3, but it's 2 or 3. Between the hours of 8 and 5, you will have visitors. You will have healthcare professionals visit. So you'll have a nurse practitioner that comes in and and visits. You'll have, I don't know, a physical therapist. Who, I mean, you're going to have some, the onesie twosies, kind of that. If you get outside of the Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And particularly look at holiday periods, you're going to have family members visit. The visitations tend to be short in duration. I wish 15 residents had 15 visitors, and then we'd certainly have a different parking requirement. I honestly think, in my opinion, the requirement of 1 parking space per 2 beds is overkill. They don't have that many visitors. There are times where we'll have before Thanksgiving, you're going to have a whole lot of folks there picking folks up. And I won't tell you there aren't times where our parking at Mayfield isn't filled, but you need the parking for employees and you need parking for a few visitors. But I think 30 trips a day is high, is my opinion. I think 15 is probably, but that gives you that gives you a sense in over the day of we've got 3 shifts coming in, so you got 3 employees coming in, 3 employees coming out. There's just not that many folks there at any given point in time. I think at Mayfield, a typical really busy time, maybe there's 6 or 8 cars. It's under the 10. I want to comment about the handicapped parking quickly, because we certainly have need, but remember, the folks are all handicapped. I mean, it's the reason they're in this kind of environment. The family that's coming to visit them, they're not all of them have handicap tags and things, but they're bringing their mother or their grandmother or whatever, out to a car. So those handicap spaces would be both for, people picking up the residents. And the reason I said that the spaces are optimistic, because the typical person that's in here is 85 years old. They're handicapped. They've got some cognitive disabilities. They're not driving. So,
How many parking spots do you have at the Mayfield facility? Just done.
in the front. So if I were to do anything different with Mayfield, I would change the parking, but the parking is all in front for guests and visitors. And there's 7 spaces up front. And then we've got a gravel lot in the back that it probably has that many spaces as well. So probably totally 14.
Are you getting deliveries for food service, and how often?
Yeah, no. So we shop at Walmart and Target. I mean, this is a house sometimes we use, Helen, what's the name of how do you get delivery from? We'll get Instacart rather than sending an employee, but there are no commercial services coming on the property. There was a question about dumpsters. And so, no, it's trash cans. We get UPS deliveries. Sure, we order stuff from Amazon, but there is no commercial traffic. I mean, it's a busy house, but it's a house.
Any medical deliveries for residents or any of that, medical equipment or any of that?
A lot of the folks are on hospice. Hospice might come with a van where they're dropping off a hospital bed or a wheelchair. But I mean, they're driving, a panel van and stuff like that.
Okay.
And I would include that in the trip count that I, mentioned.
Okay.
I have a question, Mr. Boyle. Were you ever able to get a letter from, I believe it's Cupid on the north?
Yeah. So,
communication? Okay.
so we a little bit of background. I think the name that I know her by is Campbell. It says Cupid on there, so I don't know if that's a maiden name or exactly what. Mrs. Campbell's husband was killed in a work accident in December. So we were really reluctant to do much to try to contact. And that may sound like an excuse. It's not. I mean, but so anyway, after the DRB, we reached out to her and said, look, the DRB has told us we need to be in touch with you. And so her interest, I talked to her about the plan, and she wasn't happy with the plan because she says, I want to put senior living on my property. And so, okay, I understand. And she said she had discussed with the city of Milton senior living on her property, and that didn't go anywhere. But she wanted to know if I wanted to buy her property, and so we had a discussion. And what she ended up saying is, look, she's dealing with the death of her husband. She asked that we deal with her sister, and her sister would represent her in all matters. So he said, absolutely. I've probably had 4 or 5 phone calls with the sister, and the sister was very amenable to the idea and basically just said, look, all they really want is just to sell the property. She is the Mrs. Campbell is of ill health. She's basically locked in. They just want to sell the property. So, and it seemed to be, and some numbers were exchanged, and they seemed to be pretty reasonable. So we actually arranged with the sister to go visit the property, and we even extended a verbal offer because the price that was discussed was reasonable. So the initial reaction, we don't have a letter, but I can describe and I can document. Well, I don't know how I can document the phone calls, but anyway, we've had some interaction. As I described.
Robin, is that family represented here tonight?
I was just looking through it. I don't believe so, but we can find out when the public comment comes.
And then I just had one other question. Do you have like a large passenger van or mini coach that you keep
at the property?
So at Mayfield, we did, and 2 years ago, when COVID's been with us forever, I think, we were debating about getting rid of it several years ago because we said, we're not in the transportation business. We offered initially that we would take people places. And so we had a bigger bus, and with Uber and with, I mean, their services. So we said, we're not in the transportation business. And so we're going to sell the bus that we had. And so then I don't know if you were aware, nobody wanted to buy buses 2.5 years ago when COVID started. But we did have one. We stopped providing transportation about 3 years ago or 2 years ago or something like that. We sold it. We no longer provide any kind of transportation. It just doesn't fit in. And so, no, we don't, nor do we have any plans today. But I gave you more information than you asked for. Sorry.
I got a question. So have you looked into, fitting this in a building in and you having less people there?
Well, I have. So we have we've got an existing business that I've got it there on your screen that we're trying to model this after. And there's a whole range of care options that are available. You could live in your house and you could have a full-time caregiver, and that's going to cost you $150,000 a year for a caregiver. Or you can then move into a facility, and facilities have different care levels. I want something that I feel comfortable that is well-staffed. And so the staffing ratio we just decided, and it tends to be the case for these kinds of homes, is a care ratio of 1 caregiver to 5 residents. That gives you an adequate amount of time to care for everyone. So then the question is, okay, if you're going to staff in that level, what are the right increments? Can you care for 1? Can you have 1 person? Yes, but during waking hours, there's too much going on. I don't want only 1 person there. They can't take a break and so on. Do I want 2? Well, when somebody's on a break, I'm down to 1, person. So I don't want more than 3, but I want to be able to have 3 caregivers. And so that kind of drives the number. 15 is a good community size to where my mother was actually one of 15 kids. It's a nice size house where there's enough interaction. You got enough personalities. You can do a few activities for them. One of the big issues with seniors, and one of the problems, in addition to being very costly to be at home, is isolation. The seniors are faced an environment where basically everybody that they grew up with, all their friends, they're dying. And so you need an environment where there's enough folks that they have a social setting. They can't get out to church. They can't go to their book club. They can't, so you need enough folks that there's some interaction. And we've found that right number, and that right increment is 15.
But like on this property, without creating these variances, did you have 10 and then you have
I wouldn't, right. I wouldn't operate, I won't operate a facility with 10. It's just not the right number. 15 is the number. And we do that already on a similarly sized property.
Get variances in that other property?
There aren't the same zoning requirements. The closest house to Mayfield, it's about 35 feet from structure to structure. The closest structure to the house on Cogburn would be 90 feet away. So it's not right on top of any houses.
Now, I know you had brought up the fact that you don't feel like there's a lot of cars that come in and out, but then I know during your presentation you said it a couple of times where you kind of looked at this parcel because of the fact that you have institutions of these schools and there's a lot of traffic going down the roads. Sure. And this and that, but then you're saying here there's not a lot of traffic that goes into your facility, but then you're like, you don't want to put it into a normal subdivision. But again, if you're saying that there's not really much traffic that's coming in and out, but then you don't want to go into a normal subdivision, but you want to go into a street that has a lot of traffic that's going up and down with schools and things like that. So I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, so I probably wasn't, as clear as I could be in my comments. Look, federal Fair Housing Act and stuff establishes that you can put these care homes, essentially anywhere. But that's not our approach, but you can put them essentially anywhere. The question is, where can we be where we're a good neighbor? Because we want to be a good neighbor. We want to be a part of the community. The folks that move into Mayfield, and I'm not exaggerating, it's people who live quite literally across the street. I am going to be more traffic in this house than you are going to have in a single family house where there's, a family of 6, even with teenagers coming and going. They probably are coming and going more frequently than might, but I am going to be more traffic, and so, it's not going to fit right in a subdivision. Where can I put parking and stuff like that? So my comment about a subdivision is we could go after that, but it doesn't make us a good neighbor. Here's a lot where it's isolated well enough. It's far enough from other structures. There's enough space on the property at 1.5 acres. There's going to be more trips than the average number of houses. But if you look to the property to the south, where in that same 1.5 acres, you've got 12 houses, you've got 36 bedrooms, you've got probably 24 cars, you've got, we're at a point where it's more traffic than I probably want, in a 1 acre, $1 million subdivision, but it's not more than you'd find on Cogburn Road. So I don't know if I clarified the comment. We're not heavy traffic in any sense, but it makes more sense for it to be on a main collector than it does to be on a secondary, street.
But have you looked into like larger lots, larger acres?
We've looked into larger lots. At the end of the day, all of these things are economics. We're doing this. We got into this because we had a family member that was in senior living and we just weren't satisfied and we thought we needed to do something different. And there's a lot of things that are possible. At the end of the day, it has to be economically feasible. And so I'm not pleading a business case here, but it has to be economically feasible. And economically feasible is about 6,000 square feet. It's about 1.5 acres. It's 3 employees. And that's what we run, successfully. And I would say it's an asset for Alpharetta. That's what we run successfully today. And what we're just trying to replicate in Milton, again, keeping you can see the houses side by side, keeping the same residential character.
So, but basically, from your standpoint, anything less than 15, you wouldn't move forward with the use permit?
Yeah, on this property, anything less than 15, any place that I open, our model is 15 for the reasons that I articulated. If you guys recommended, okay, this is approved for 10, no, we wouldn't move forward with it.
Actually, I don't have most of the questions have been answered. What size, based on the bedrooms, are those?
Yeah, so they're about each room is about 300 square feet, which I don't know if that seems like a lot to you or not. The state actually.
I have a daughter in a wheelchair, so that's why I was asking the question.
The state has a requirement that the rooms have to be at least 90 square feet.
90?
Yeah, 90.
You can't turn a wheelchair around.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. So our rooms are designed so that everybody has room for a bed and a room for a sitting area. And there's a picture here, but so the idea is it's their bedroom and they've got kind of like a little sitting area and they've got a private bedroom, private bathroom. So that 300 square feet it's just the right size where the bathroom can be big enough to be handicapped accessible. You can get on either side of the bed. You can have a sitting area. Smaller than that, you can make smaller.
Oh,
but the state says you can, right? But you can't.
Okay.
And not only do you have a person who's handicapped. Let's say they fall and you need to get EMS. In there, or they fall and you need your employees to pick them up. You need a certain amount of space just to be able. So 300, we find it's perfect sizing.
One more relating to that space. They have visitors. Most of those are visiting in the community area.
Yeah, a combination. This has it's got a living, our place has a living room, just like any other place. And it's got there's a patio and there's so the answer is, so here, you can see in the upper left-hand corner, that's a common area. I mean, we call it a sun porch, and folks visit there. The one in the upper middle, that's just inside the front door. It's a living room. If you walked into it, and that would be the same thing at Cogburn, this is going to look like a house. The only thing that's going to be different, is when you start counting the bedrooms, you go, wow, there's a lot of bedrooms here. But
I have a couple follow-up questions, a little disjointed. Currently, how many hours per week are you and your wife at Mayfield personally?
So I'm on staff at our church, so I'm not there very frequently. I'll be there tonight, because I'm working through the night because one of our staff members needed some time off for death in the family. So, yeah, we're small business. Helen, you're there 6 hours a day? 8? I'm sorry. Helen, would you come up and 10 to 6.
Okay. And how many hours do you plan to be at the Cogburn location if it gets approved? Would you split your time? Would you?
If we're going to ever come up, why don't you come on
Yeah.
up to the microphone?
Why don't you, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Helen Boyle. We have some really excellent staff where we currently are that will be in place to kind of just continue to smoothly run Mayfield. And I will be spending most of my time at Cogburn.
At Cogburn? Oh, okay. So one of the things that's, it's not the question you asked, but our staff in living has already measured probably in weeks.
Can you step back behind the mic?
I'm not exaggerating. I mean, it's a very high turnover. The big places tend to be staffed by staffing agencies. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. You can measure our tenure, the tenure of our employees in years. There's employees that have been with us since we owned the place in 2013. If you go on our website, you can see a picture of our staff and put them on our website because they've been there forever. We'll take about half of our staff from Alpharetta and they would staff Cogburn and then we would fill back up. On each one of those shifts we mentioned, there's a manager and that manager has relevant medical training and they're overseeing the house and they're kind of like the house mom.
Next question is just more of a clarification. I noticed the petitioner is F.H. Schindler. What is your role at F.H. Schindler?
That's just, so what we're doing, it's incorporated. I mean, so you're looking at F.H. Schindler?
F.H. Schindler is my uncle that we help care for that kind of drew us to the desire to do what we're doing.
So are you officers there, owners?
So Helen owns 100% of F.H. Schindler. It's just, so it's the whole, it's the operating entity. And then I'm her landlord. I own 100% of a company called Francis Schindler. Both of those are just, one's a single member LLC. And the other is an S Corp that's entirely owned by Helen. So it's not big business. And the name was, as Helen said, it was her great uncle that it's kind of memorialized after.
Okay. To get clarification around the handicapped parking, shifting here, given that the residents do not drive and there are people that do maybe come to transport, and we want to make sure there's adequate parking for the staff and for visitors who are not handicapped, how many, even though the variance is for 4, or how many handicap spots do you really feel you need?
I think 4 is fully adequate. We do not have situations where we don't have situations where you are taking in and out, more than that number of people. Could we get by with 3? Probably. I mean,
Yeah.
but-
My concern, I think, is following up on Mr. Shaw's comment that if you have them designated as handicap spots, then the remaining 6 or 7 spots are all that's available for your 3 staff, maybe sometimes 4, and your visitors. So I'm concerned if you designate too many as handicap, then you won't have enough parking.
So we actually discussed that. So it's private property. And so the question, so at Mayfield today, the parking out front is for resident families and, and so on. And so it's in close proximity to the door. It's reserved for that. They're not specifically marked as handicapped. These would be marked as handicapped, but look, my commentary to that is that we don't have more than, this kind of number of folks, coming and going, and we can certainly evaluate it again. But again, it's modeled after kind of what we're doing and experiencing today. I don't want all these parking places out in front that we have in Mayfield. We don't need them. And there's adequate, parking. So we feel like it's adequate, but I certainly understand the question. And if you want us to look at something again, we can. I mean, we can add additional parking spaces in the back, for further, parking if you guys feel like it's necessary. But from operating the business for the past 9 years, it meets our practical requirement.
And then just.
I'm sorry.
A final, go ahead.
One of the things that I just want to stress, and I hope it's come out in my comments, it's really a house, and so it's not a daycare center where you've got a rush of, cars coming at a, certain hour. And I'm not going to say there aren't times when there's several cars there. Of course there are. But this is not commercial in nature where you've got just a huge flood of cars all coming at the same time. Yeah, maybe on Thanksgiving morning, you got a bunch of cars there, but typically not.
And just really a statement, I would like to see you eliminate or minimize the need for variances and relook at the site plan, whether that's moving the structure or the addition to the front. I would be more amenable if I saw a open field or parking within a buffer than I would a structure.
So there is not going to be any structure within the buffer.
Well, no, the required 50-foot buffer. So yes, there would be, because
Yeah.
it's 42 feet.
There is now.
Okay. You mean if the variance wasn't granted?
Right.
Yeah, because there would be no parking, but okay, I understand.
I think I'm really out of questions.
So back to this, again, I know parking is a concern for me. You obviously know the business. So on the weekends, for instance, and just in general, like when family members do come and visit, I understand family members may be working, whatever, so 8 to 5, they may not be around. But like, what are there like visitor hours or something like that where they, you don't want family members to come past 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, something like that in the evening. And then on the weekends, do you see more traffic coming in of family and
Yeah,
other
you
people?
would think that there would be more traffic on the weekends, but it's not the case. The people just the families don't visit as frequently. We don't have official hours when people can visit, but because candidly, if somebody is sick and they want to come visit their mom and it's the middle of the night, we're going to allow that. However, we guide people to come after 9 o'clock in the morning because the folks have breakfast at 9, so from 9 to 9:30 they're eating. So after 9:30, and they're starting to go to bed at 8 o'clock. So some are in bed at 8:45 or 9. But so between 8 and 8 or 9 and 9. We try to guide people, but I'll be the first to say, and it happens very infrequently, but there can be folks coming and visiting outside of those hours. But
So, also in terms of like medical emergencies, what are you seeing at Mayfield?
Sure.
You know, how often?
Yep. So I actually pulled a Freedom of Information, a FOIA request for the city of Alpharetta, just to see. I had an impression. Was my impression accurate or valid? We in the past, from 2019, from January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2021, there were 14 emergency responses in those 36 months. So that was basically one response about every 11 weeks. And you can see a distribution of the call times on the bottom right of that. So there was one call between midnight and 8 a.m. in 36 months. There were 5 calls between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. There were 6 calls between 6 p.m. 5 calls between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. And there were 3 calls between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. So in the course of 36 months, those were the calls for emergency response. And typically what that is somebody has a serious fall. I mean, the residents are at major fall risk, or there'll be a cardiac event or something like that. But most of the healthcare is provided locally. It would only be, truly as emergencies.
So based on the questions that we've been asking so far, and especially the concern I think that a lot of us have about the variance, and you see that there's a way of configuring the addition so that it doesn't have to go into any sort of a current setback or.
So I I know your job is not to design for me, but I was actually going to pose a question because to help me to understand the input that you guys were providing. If I understand the buffer in the back is not a buffer that I can really do anything about because that's for septic. That's the area of that's the best area of the property for parking for septic. It's going to be open green field as it is today. So there's nothing to be seen there. So I had 2 questions, but the first question is, are you concerned about that buffer variance? And I know you may or may not want to go on the record. I'm just trying to understand if I should rework things, what should I rework?
But there's no structure that you're going to have over there. It's just going to be open field.
Correct. Let me go into it. It's pure. So right here in the back of the property, it's purely going to be, I'll put this in presentation mode. That rear buffer is purely to allow septic lines. We would not remove any, the tree line you see on the east side of the properties would remain. I have a topographic map where I can show you that there is no line of sight to anything on the property from the east. You just simply, because of the topography of the land and because of the trees, there is no line of sight, but that specific buffer request is purely to allow septic lines to go into what would typically be identified as an undisturbed buffer.
And to your knowledge, do you know if the septic lines can be put in outside of that buffer area?
To my knowledge, to comply with the requirement to have a primary field, which would be installed, and to have a secondary field. So to keep this property septic, it's not possible to observe the 50-foot buffer lines and be able to have adequate space for the septic field that would be installed, and then have adequate secondary space.
Yeah, I think if you remove the structure off the back, move it out front, I think I question that.
So I'm not basing that on my own knowledge. I'm basing that on the soil evaluation of the soil engineer. The soil engineer identified that where the existing structure is, that all the space immediately adjacent to that is cutaway, or what he called is cutaway. So it's not native soil. It's cut down to clay, and so there is a soil survey that's been submitted to the city that identifies the areas that would perk.
It can be reevaluated. I'm just going to say that and leave it there from an engineering perspective, but that's just up to you.
No, I'm happy to evaluate. I'm simply going by the guidance.
Yeah,
We had
I'm
an
just
engineer, a
saying,
soil
I
survey
mean,
engineer.
I've seen tons and tons of cases over the years where, we've been able to maneuver some septic stuff because for pools, I'll just give you an example, where it was just locationally, it was hitting a variance and we didn't want the variance. So we said, okay, do you want to go back and take a look at it? And they did, and they were able to make an adjustment. So I'm just saying there's always potential for adjustments. It's just a matter of if that's something you want to do to avoid the variances. I think we're just making that recommendation from what I'm hearing.
So then my second question about the 50-foot buffer on the north side of the property. And again, I respectfully, I understand you guys are not, you're not here to design for me, but the driveway which infringes on the buffer area, is that a concern? So the driveway, the existing driveway and curb cut is within the 50-foot buffer zone.
I'll speak to that. Personally, the driveway and the open field being needing a variance does not concern me as much as the structure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, what if you were to put additional parking like we were talking about? If you were to put additional parking in the back, I mean, again, whatever is going to be the back, and if there is some in the front, and there was a driveway there, how would that work then too?
I don't know. We're over my
well, then, yeah,
pay grade
just
in
making
terms
sure
of-
that you take that in consideration as well.
Right.
Depending on this parking consideration, because if 4 are going to be handicapped and you have 6, and you have 3, you guys come 4 or 5, and then you have medical professionals who come, and 6 is gone.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen all. I mean, we're basing it on our. If you guys want more parking places, I'll put more parking places in. I mean, it's not a problem. It's just based on. I don't want to put in parking that puts concrete in front of folks because I would like them to see their house. I'm not going to put inadequate parking in because it just wouldn't be good for what I'm trying to do. It's based on the code and it's based on what was practical for us. But thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I'm just wondering too, with that additional parking, you're talking more on the north side?
Like if it's whatever's considered behind this structure that's facing Cogburn.
Because I know one of the biggest objections to this from, one of the neighbors was the noise and the driveway coming along the south. And I know it was originally gravel and you've moved that to concrete to reduce the noise, but I think there were still concerns about, people coming and going, locking cars and all that. I'm wondering if there's any way, and it's problematic in its own right, but I wonder if there's any way to have the driveway go on the north side versus the south side. And again, I'm not designing it, but that would just seem to be more sense. But again, we've got a 50-foot undisturbed buffer up there, so we'd have to talk through that a little bit. But that just seems like, they were pretty vocal about that.
Sure.
On that
There's the neighbors to the south. So you see a picture of the. Let me see if I can find a better. So here we go. The neighbors to the south, their concern was noise, and there is no required buffer on the 13275. The required buffer is on actually the part of the T4 zoned area, and so there's 40 feet there. We brought to minimize the impact on the buffer. We brought the parking to the south side, but Mr. Nolte, as you mentioned, if we leave the parking on the north side, then it's in a buffer zone. So we moved it out of a buffer zone to accommodate, but there were concerns about noise. I mean, while I respect the concerns about noise, the distance, the 100-foot distance, the 40-foot undisturbed buffer, the fact is that there's a 15-foot elevation change I mean, there is a substantial buffer, that exists there, which is the reason we said, okay, that's probably the right place. Now, certainly and I'll let them speak, the folks on Regions Trace asked, can't you move all the parking to the front, of the lot? Well, Milton doesn't want all the parking in the front of the lot. Can you move all the parking to the north side? Yes, but then that puts it in the buffer. So we're trying to balance the various requirements, and not to pull on your heartstrings, but I'm just trying to provide a house for some folks to live here in Milton.
I think if it's not reworked, I mean, it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that from, DRB is they're going to have you put stuff there. I'm just thinking ahead. But I think it's got to be re-architected to make it work. I mean, if you want 15 and we try and avoid variances, I mean, to make it realistic for this site, I just don't see any other way. I mean, I've been looking, rearranging.
Mr. Chairman, if I could interpose, sorry, we are currently at the applicant's presentation time. I have 9 minutes of presentation time and an hour of questions. May I suggest we hear from those in support and those opposed, and we can continue questions if there are still some.
Great. Anybody have, so I think at this point, we'll move to the public comments in favor of. Do we have any cards? Do we have people speaking? Okay, great. How many do we have?
We don't have any that are in favor, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. How many do we have in opposition? Okay.
We have 6.
Okay. Well, so I think, why don't we call those in.
Mr. Chairman, can I say, the rules call for 10 minutes total for each side. I know a lot of that time was spent, but they did spend only 9 minutes in terms of actual presentation. You are able to provide additional time if you'd like, but I would remind you that there is supposed to be a 10-minute maximum.
Fair enough. It'd be great if we stick to that.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to invite John Grebs to the podium.
Hello. My name is John Krebs. I am on the board for the Court at Windward Village, which is the community on the south side property line. Am I able to be on the computer with the Google Maps? Is that possible?
I don't know.
They can switch it. So if you can see it on the screen, you can go.
Okay. Well, the question is, the concern is having noise and parking on the south side of the property behind several homes that align that property. Claire here is here to represent that as well. We have asked, can parking be moved to the front part? But there's already a variance request to put handicap parking there. Why not put the additional parking there? If you're going to make an exception for handicap, I think it would be logical to put extra parking up front as well. If the house, the new structure, can be moved further toward the south property line where the parking is suggested, and that parking is moved to the north side of that building, still probably away from the buffer, I think that would be amenable to the residents, because they'd have a corner of a building with sleeping residents versus cars coming and going. If they're going to put the structure on the front part of the house, if it's elongated, again, a house versus parking is more quiet, so all the parking could be on the front side of whatever structure they end up building. The septic field, if you're concerned about that buffer, if that parking is removed, that field can be elongated versus widened. You have room for septic there. I don't think the odor is going to be that much of an issue because of what they plan on doing. When you're standing on that property, you smell the horses, period. You're not going to smell the odor of septic. I've had septic before, you don't smell it. So my conclusion is, if they're going to have to move the building further away for the northern buffer, because you don't want to provide a variance, I believe Judy mentioned that you wouldn't mind having a a driveway on a variance area, on a buffer area versus a structure. So if the driveway was completely elongated on the north side with parking on the north side and all the buildings are on the south side, you solve the problem. And I think you also solved the problem that you raised about turning around. There is no place to turn around now. If you put an ambulance in there and you put a fire truck in there, they have to back out. There is no way to turn around. There's no three-point turn in their design. That needs to be up front. So when it comes to parking, if it stays in the back, light pollution. The residents that live there, all the bedrooms are in the back of the house. So whether it's during the night when the lights are on, I have woods behind me. I'm lucky. They're going to have lights there regardless, whether it's floodlights on the corner of the house or lamppost lights. So the goal is to minimize that for the residents that are sleeping there. When my floodlight goes off because of a raccoon, my room is lit up, and their rooms will be lit up because the lights are going to be on 24/7. There's a horse farm on the north side. They're not going to mind parking. They're not going to mind cars coming and going. The house is up to the front of the property, way far away from the existing property that's being developed. So the property to the north that may not be represented here today, I think would be feasible to have the activity of the property on the north side.
Great.
Am I missing anything, Bob? All right.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next public comment is from Claire Sullivan.
Hello.
13297 Regent Trace, and I sent a letter to each of you, which I think you probably received. I just wanted to direct you to page 6 of the applicant's packet, the new revised site plan from February 17th, so that you can get a better idea of exactly the way our houses are situated. In this new revision, the parking, these 6 spaces are directly in back of my house. And he's saying that there's 90 feet from my house to the existing structure, when that may be true, but there's not 90 feet between me and the parking. And I know that there's no buffer because I'm a lowly T4, but I would like to have some. I just want to say, please, don't disturb my peace and quiet. That's all I want. I'm loving it there. It's a very quiet neighborhood, and so that's my ask.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. David Drennan.
Thank you. I'm Dave Drennan. You might see that I show up as Charles sometimes, Charles D. My mother named me Charles, but she never called me that. So for the record, I'm Charles David Drennan. Okay.
Your address, please?
770 Barbary Drive.
Thank you.
I live in the Hermitage neighborhood, which is near, I received one of the notices. I'm in one of the near properties here. Up until 30 days ago, I had no idea what this Deerfield form-based code was until I received this notice in the mail. I'm a retired engineer and I have plenty of time to dig into things. So I thought, well, what the heck? I should look into this and see exactly what this means. So I started studying it. And before we even get into variances and whether variances should be allowed here, I'm at T2. Deerfield form-based code T2 says that what's acceptable is 1 unit per acre. And that's what exists on the property today, 1 unit. It further states that in addition to that, you can have an accessory building. But when you read the details of that 64-page document, it says that that accessory building can only have up to 440 additional square feet of habitable space. So where I get concerned is when I start looking at, and before I go any further, I want to say I appreciate people that are doing what this couple is trying to do. I think we need more of these facilities. My mother was disabled from a stroke 5 years ago, and someday I would like her to be in a house like this. My question is the property that exists and whether this is the appropriate use for that particular property. So I've attended a number of meetings. I've read the 358-page 2040 plan. I've dug into a lot of things here to try to understand this better. And everything seems to come back to the septic system. I have a septic system at my house because I live in T2. It's a one room or a single family home on a 1 acre lot. So the concern is to put 15 additional bedrooms on the back of a 2,500 square foot home and to create this large septic system, I think is going to create a lot of problems in the future. Now, we can talk about whether these buffers are required or whether they're planted, but one thing for certain, once you establish a septic system, you don't drive over that drain field, you don't mess with it. That's a lot of drain field on a small lot. You know, I've studied the 32-page packet in the plan. I understand this is an 1.5 acre lot, but I also, from previous meetings, understand the reason you can't do much on the front with the septic system is the soil won't perk. Also, at some point, there was a well there, and I have the Georgia regulations on what you can and can't do. It suggests that's a dry well today, but at some point it was a well. You can't put a septic system within a certain distance of a well. That's what's forcing all of this development to the back of the lot where the soil can perk for a septic system. But again, my concern is you're going to have to breach and get into these buffer areas to do that. And then if there is a failure, if trees start to die, are you going to be able to get back in there and to plant trees and to replace trees and that sort of thing? I think that's a real concern. I think this is a wonderful idea for the right property. You know, further I've studied, I know there's a home existing on Cogburn Drive on Cogburn Road that's being used this way today. It's a small 3-bedroom house. You drive by, you don't notice anything's going on. If you check online though, and whether this can be verified, I don't know, but there is a suggestion that there is a home operating in Regions Trace. For $2,717 a month, you can stay there. Now, I've spoken to Robin and others. I don't know if that can be verified or not, but it's probably within the 1,320 feet. So again, it all comes back to this septic system. You know, a 15-bedroom bath addition with 3 staff on hand and people coming and going, 20-some people using a septic system on apparently an 1.5 acre lot, but since you can't use any of the front half, it's really like putting a septic system on a 3/4 acre lot with that many people, if you really get down to what it looks like. And then you get into runoff water. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the property, but in behind that property, probably there's a small horse rink, but then below that, the land drops off very steeply. And all of that water from the detention pond that comes under Webb Road from Target, the Target store and all that, that water is rising in the back of our homes. And I've got pictures I can show you. It looks like a wasteland. I mean, that water rises, it overruns the spillway that's just to the east of us. There's a tree trunk right now. If you look at the GIS survey, you can see it right online. There's a tree that's probably 18 inches in diameter, 20 feet long. It's on top of the spillway right now, waiting for the next rain to pick that up and push it downstream. So again, I applaud what this couple wants to do. I have no problem with it, but I question, is this the right property to do this? And I appreciate all of your time here. Wow, to stay this late and to do the work you guys do, it's pretty impressive. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Two quick questions, Paul. One is, we were supposed to start with those in favor of, correct?
You asked for them and there were none.
Okay. Okay. I thought my mistake. And then now we've run out of time, correct? So.
Right now, we're about 11 minutes, but we're just giving,
I move to extend the time for public comment for another,
Cards, says Robin. How many more cards?
for
One
another,
I'm just going to read because I don't want to speak.
So
Two speaking and
for another up to 10 minutes.
Second.
Just to be clear, that would have to be for both pro and con.
Correct. So we've got a motion to extend the public time for 10 minutes for both the pro and the con. We got a second. Oh, okay.
Need a vote.
we have to vote.
Details. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right.
I'd like to invite Nancy Twyman to the podium.
Thank you very much. I'm Nancy Twyman. I live at 13365 Cogburn. So my home is directly across from St. Francis School. It's a 1965 ranch. Looks all of it with the pink and blue tile. But the reason I'm here is that both my husband and I have had senior care experience. So again, I do applaud what the gentleman and his wife are doing. We also have run a sewer wastewater plant up in Forsyth County and class 3 at one point in time. So that's several years ago. But I wanted to wind up speaking on my behalf because I own this home at the moment. When I bought the home, I did wind up inquiring for probably the exact same reason and looking at developing the land. I've got 1.6 acres, so in essence equivalent, and was basically told all I could do was wind up putting on another guest house. So my biggest concern with respect to the project that's being proposed is just like what Chuck, I want to say, who I don't know, just met, his proposal is basically, is it the right plan for the size of the lot? I'm deeply concerned with 15 beds, 15 bathrooms, doesn't count the other bathrooms that probably are already in the home, okay? And just feeling that the leach lines and what would be there would just be exacerbated with the kind of size of the project that they're talking about. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next public comment is from Mr. Ron Crump, who has asked to not speak, but would like for his concerns to be read into record. He is in opposition because of the noise levels and the closeness to the backyard, which he feels will devalue the property.
All right, thank you.
And our final public comment is from Michelle Weston.
Thank you all. I appreciate
Can you
the
please
interest.
state your name and address?
I'm so sorry.
That's
Michelle
okay.
Weston. I actually live at 14835 East Bluff Road, but my husband and I own the home at 13287 Regent Trace. And we've owned that home since 2012. We originally purchased it for my grandfather, who was elderly, so he could live there. I am speaking in opposition to this project. And I was thinking, am I speaking in opposition to a variance? No, I guess maybe it would be the use permit, but not exactly sure of all the technicalities. My biggest concern, which some of you have touched upon, is the 15 bedrooms, 15 full baths, the size, the scope. And I have spoken with the applicants about this. I was here for the CZIM and I raised my concerns. I asked the same questions that you did, Commissioner, about would it be possible to reduce the number in the home? And I understand the applicant's position about for economic reasons and for the quality of care, he doesn't want to do that. But I would agree with the speakers who spoke before me in opposition to say, I applaud this concept. I like this concept. I agree that our community needs it. I don't believe this lot that the applicants have selected is the appropriate lot to place this size of a residence on. I would like to, I jotted down a few notes. You raised the question of low density. Apparently low density is defined by the number of structures or dwellings on a lot. But it's okay, we could put 15 or we could put 20, 30. What is the limit of individuals we could put into a dwelling in a low density lot? That concerns me. It's just a question that came up. The applicants have talked about the other property that they own and have run for several years on Mayfield Road. A couple of distinctions that I've noted. The other property is located on sewer. It doesn't require a septic system. That's a huge difference. The septic system is one of the reasons they're requesting one of their variances. It's also a slightly larger property. It's on 1.7 acres as opposed to 1.5. And the way the property is situated is right next door to the Alpharetta Art Center. So their alternative senior residence is bordered by a parking lot on one side, not by 7 homeowners whose backyards face right onto the property they're wanting to, the senior home that they're wanting to do. As one of the neighbors mentioned, the way the homes are designed in the Windward Court subdivision, the living rooms and the master bedrooms face the backyard. There are sliding doors that open to patios into the backyard. So the living room, it's right there. So that's why there's a lot of concern by the homeowners on Region Trace is what is this going to look like on the property, and what is the noise going to be? The applicant stated that they have the right, they could apply to open their senior living home in a subdivision, but they don't want to do that. But they want to open one right next to a subdivision, essentially, where they have, again, 7 homeowners who are concerned about their privacy and their quiet enjoyment of their property. So these are some distinctions that I would make based on the property they have owned and operated and what they're proposing now on Cogburn Road. The final concern I'll mention is about this use permit. My understanding is it conveys with the property. So these owners, these applicants, I'm very impressed by them. I don't think anyone in this room doesn't like what they want to do. Our concern is where they want to do it. And if this property or these applicants, I'm not sure technically, if this use permit is granted, it conveys with the property. These are lovely people. Who's going to purchase the property next? And the property, as we're listening, it's almost like a Rubik's Cube to try and get it to fit between the parking and the driveway and the space and the septic field. I think they're going to be on top of things. I think they're going to maintain the septic system. I hope they will. I have faith they will. What if they sell in 3 years? The next people coming in, they're going to have the use permit for a senior living facility or home. Are they going to be as conscientious? Is it going to be 15? Because it's going to be built with 15 bedrooms. So is it always going to be? I don't understand if the use permit allows it to be 15. Or could they maybe split them up into, we just heard they're going to be 300 square foot rooms, but the state only requires 90 square feet. Maybe they're going to put a divider and they're going to have 2 people in each room. I mean, it's a concern to me that this could be ongoing, and I don't know that it's the best thing. I definitely don't think it's the best thing for the property owners on Region Trace. I'm not sure it's the best thing for Milton either, because of where this lot is situated and because of the many constraints that go along with it. If I were queen and they were amenable, I would love it if it were a home for maybe 8 individuals, the same, what could be a large family. That seems to be much more manageable. And a lot of the problems would disappear. You'd need a smaller septic system, a smaller septic field. Wouldn't have to worry about getting a variance there. Wouldn't need maybe as many parking spaces, but that's not amenable to them. So for me, it's an impasse. I don't think it's a good fit. So thank you for listening to my concerns. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. That's all of them? Okay,
That's all.
I believe the applicant now has equal time remaining. I don't know. Is that correct?
Yes, by my calculation, about 11 minutes.
Okay. What?
You're 11 more minutes.
Should be in rebuttal as opposed to a new argument.
I understand. Thank you. When Fulton County approved the court at Windward Village, they approved a number of different developments at the same time. I'm not familiar all with that history. One of the things that they required was a 40-foot buffer between those homes, the ones that are 8 homes to an acre, and the specific property. So that 40-foot buffer, it's shown, if you look at the top of the slide I have here, you can see an outline of the property, 13275 Cogburn. You can see the homes of the homeowners who you just heard speak, and Fulton County required a 40-foot buffer. We had an architect do a section study, which means you take, and you guys probably know this more than me because you see this stuff all the time, but you kind of cut the property in half to look at the elevation of things. So the existing structure that we propose on the back of the home would be below the roof line of the existing house. So in all cases, the height of the house would be lower. You'll notice that the house on Region Trace, so there's a specific example of 13307. Most of the houses on Region's Trace have we walked it with the property owners there. So we didn't hear from him, but the president of the Homeowners Association with Region Trace agreed to meet with us. So we met and we walked the properties to agree on, what was the situation and in fact, what was necessary to maintain this buffer. From the homes to the rear privacy fences is 30 feet. Then there's 40 feet of buffer. That buffer has an elevation of about 15 feet. It ranges from 12 to 15 feet. You can see a picture in the bottom right-hand corner, so you get some kind of a scale. Standing on level ground, looking towards Region Trace. Up in the top of the pictures, you can just see the top of the houses. If you look at the picture or the diagram to the top, you'll notice there is no sight line for the related to the new building structure or any parking. So it's just physically not possible to see what's going on the property. I can show you other photographs. We're certainly cognizant of the concern about noise. What I would just comment is that the few cars that we talk about here are a fraction of the number of cars that are present in the same density of space along that Cogburn Trace Road. So, you've got 8 houses per acre. So in the same distance, you've got 12 homes. And again, if you extrapolate that, that's 24 cars, that's 36 bedrooms and so on. So our comment is we think between the existing vegetation and the conversion or the movements towards concrete parking, it would mitigate any noise concerns and lack of visibility. We also looked at the proximity to the Hermitage. So if you look at the next slide, the closest structure in the Hermitage is about 200 yards away. So from the back of the existing garage to the closest home at Hermitage, it's 200 yards away. There is a substantial elevation difference. I don't know why I said 200. Yeah, 200 yards. There's a substantial elevation difference. So the homes at Barbary, on Barbary Drive, at least this one in particular, is at about 1,055 feet. You can see the peak of the Cogburn Road property is at the back. That's at 1,068 feet. And then the garage is at 1,064 feet. If you take a look we talked a little bit about the topography, but I just pulled City of Milton topographic maps to show that there really is quite a difference there. If you look from the property going back, you can't see, even standing on the property, you can't see the riding rink, which is immediately behind the property. Between the home and Region Trace, you actually have 3 sections of trees. So you have the trees which would not be disturbed on the back of the Cogburn property. Then you have a riding rink. Then you have a stand of trees. Then you have this pond kind of swampy area. And I can't characterize the nature of it any differently than the existing homeowners, but we would not have any impact on that. We are, in fact, the property slopes away from that, not toward it. Then there is another stand of trees, and then the closest home. So just what I want to just establish is that there is no line of sight in any direction from the Cogburn property to the Hermitage or back. I guess I finally want to comment that when the folks that move into our place are the folks that live right next door. They live right across the street. They live in the neighborhood. They want their parents in an area that is that's close, that looks like a single family home. And while the concerns are raised about the number of bedrooms, I guess if I didn't do this, I would also be frightened by the idea of 15 bedrooms. Boy, that seems like a lot. Bedrooms are smaller than, they're a good size, but they're smaller than many of the bedrooms in a typical Milton house. We're talking about 6,600 square feet, a 6,600 square foot footprint on 1.5 acres, which is, I don't know what the average is for Milton, but I know there are homes which are well in excess of 6,600 square feet. So it's not excessive if you look at just the square footage, it's not excessive. If you look at the density of the property immediately next to it, it's not excessive. There's 24 bedrooms in the same geography. The last comment I want to share is that I just want to use as an example. If you look up just up the road at 13665, it's permitted as under adult senior housing as well. It's in Georgia, there are a whole range of different kinds of facility licensures. We would be licensed as what's called a personal care home. That is licensed by, so even if Milton said we could do this, the state can say, no, you can't, because you would have to be licensed for it. And so somebody can't just come in and do this. You have to have certain qualifications. You have to, a lot of documentation, audits, surveys, and so on. But the facility up the street, you can see that there's parking in the front. But the comment that I want to share is that these kinds of homes are simply embedded in the community. I know if you're not familiar with them or you hear that it's coming next to you, it raises all kinds of alarm bells about what this is. The reality is that there's a move towards creating residential housing for folks that have different kind of disabilities, because many don't want to be housed in big facilities. They want to live in local communities. And so whether it is this particular, I think this is the only one that I'm aware of that's licensed in Milton. There is a demand for this, and the demand is residential nature. And the question is, how do you find the right kind of property? The argument that we pose is, if you look at the Cogburn Road corridor, what we're talking about is a residential application, but it's really in what's an institutional corridor. To the north, you have the one 225 bed facility. To the south, you have the other 200 bed facility. If you look at the property that remains on Cogburn Road, let me just get to it. Basically, only the lots shown in the dark gray remain residential today, not associated with a subdivision. The property owner to the north of us that I just mentioned, they have 7 or 8 acres. They're wanting to sell. This property is going institutional, that's the nature of there's 5 churches. There's 5 schools. There's 3 churches. This preserves a residential setting in what's otherwise becoming an institutional corridor. And with that, I'll pause for any final questions.
Great, thank you. Anybody have any final questions?
Um, You can ask questions. The commission can ask questions,
Yeah.
yes.
We just close it for
Once you're
public
done.
comment?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's closed for public comment. Discussion, and do we want to take these use case and then each variance individually? So let's discuss the use case of the senior living. Comments? No comments?
I'll go ahead. I think in looking at our strategic and comprehensive plan, or the comprehensive plan, as well as, even what we heard tonight, is that there does appear to be a need in Milton for this kind of use. Whether or not this is the right location for it is another question, but the use need appears to be there. Yeah, so there is a need and desire for it in the community. Whether this is the right location, I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, I get the feeling most of the discussions here on the variances.
I agree with Judy.
Yeah, I agree as well. And the comments I heard on the DRB were pretty similar. It's just maybe not the right place.
So now moving to the variances. The three variances, the handicap spaces in the front. Thoughts, comments?
So I'm still of with this site plan, where the building was within 50 feet of the proposed building is within 50 feet of the north property line. I have a challenge with, so I have a challenge with this site plan. I don't know if the applicant, he did make some revisions to move it a little further south, a foot, and shift it a little further back. So there were some changes from the DRB view. But as this is laid out, I would like to see it reconfigured to try to minimize or eliminate the need for variances, especially for a structure. If council did not have the same opinion and wanted to allow the handicap parking in the front, I would like to see a condition that any parking in the front have additional screening, some hedges, some mixed vegetation, as the arborist would do. But if council were to approve parking in the front, I would want further screening, because when I drove on Cogburn Road, I can see the house. So if I can see the house, I could see the parking. So I'd want additional, if council was to approve that, I would recommend a condition be that it be screened.
Because at the end of the day, we've got, as a commission, we have four options. We can either, approve as presented, or recommend approval as presented. We can recommend approval with conditions. We can recommend denial, or we can recommend deferral.
Can't recommend denial, but with a condition if it's approved.
I think your comments can be made of record, but the formal recommendation has to be one of the four.
Right. And the other thing about the variance is we are, again, as a commission, tied to some very stringent variance standards. And it has to meet all of those standards. I think that's where I'm having difficulty with, because the main one that always keeps coming up is unnecessary hardship. And what I see here, as far as to grant the variances, it certainly appears to me that because we're going 15 homes, because the septic is larger, that it's a self-imposed hardship. It's not a hardship per se. That's kind of where I'm leaning right now, or I'm coming down right now, is on the variances. I I don't see it meeting the criterion of the variance that we need to have, that we need to see.
Strongly agree with that.
I think everyone wants, we enjoyed your presentation this evening, by the way. I think you're a very credible applicant. And as you noted in your presentation, and as we know as residents of Milton, what you're proposing to put in here is needed. And it really comes down to, is this the right lot? And where I'm coming out on it is that it's just too intensive a use of this lot for my taste. And I'd love to give you another half acre so you could get the 50 feet or whatever we're missing here. But for me, it just isn't going to be there tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I wish there was a way to put this, to locate this in there. And I think Laura talked about redesigning it and where the variances wouldn't be required. Because I don't think we can, I don't think I can vote yes on the variance because of the hardship. So do we take a vote on, I'm sorry, go ahead. Do we take a vote on the use?
You
permit and the
can
individual
do
variances?
it either way. You can make a motion to consider all of them and list what that motion would be. You can do them separately if you prefer.
I'd like to move that the Planning Commission recommend denial of both U22-01 and VC 22-01.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion?
From a discussion standpoint, I would have been in favor of the use permit, but not with this site plan. But would agree that I would have liked to see a site plan that didn't require variances. So my thing is, I'm okay with the use at this location, just not with this site plan and not with the variances.
All right, so there's a motion on the floor. So what are we asking for, to take back the motion and
Was the
ask for a
motion
different motion? I'm confused.
Just what the question becomes,
We have to vote. Well,
Yeah, we have a motion on the floor.
Motion's on the
We have a
floor.
motion,
And it's been
so-
seconded.
We've got a motion and a
We have to
second.
vote it up or
So-
down, right?
Unless the motion and second are withdrawn, that motion stands and must be voted
It's
on,
already been
unless it's
seconded.
amended.
It has
Yeah,
been-
it's already been
I
seconded.
second.
Yes, right.
Now this is discussion, then he's got to call. for
Right.
the vote.
Okay.
So Paul,
Yes.
if I don't agree with the denial of the use permit, do I vote no and see if we can get another motion on the
My
table?
understanding of your position, that sounds like what you're thinking.
It's just a point of clarification, Paul. If we vote on this and it is denied, that doesn't preclude the applicant from coming back with another application, does it?
It doesn't permit them from ever coming back.
Correct.
City council
Oh,
ultimately
well, yeah.
denies
Well,
it.
yeah, the city council has the
yeah.
ultimate
It's
decision.
not till the city.
Exactly. This is just a
But can-
recommendation.
Can the maker of the motion and the second of the motion, can they ask to withdraw it and then do a new motion if they want to?
Right, if
They
both
want
the maker and the second withdraw their motions. But that's up to,
I'm going to stand pat.
yeah, that's fine.
I'm sticking with the second. I think we need to move forward with the motions on the floor.
All right. I'll call for a vote. All in favor of recommending denial of U22-01 and VC 22-01, say aye.
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 All opposed? 2.
5-2?
I guess all I'd want to add is I really hope there's a way we can make this fit. I think it would be an asset to the city. I think it's a great business model. I think it's it's just too much for this piece of property. And that's what we have to vote on here. That's what we have to go on here is that. So, and again, very good presentation. Thank you very much. All right. The next one, the text amendments.
Next door, maybe. The lady next door will sell. Okay.
Slideshow. I did one from the beginning.
So have other topics, don't we?
Okay, the next item is a text amendment, actually two of them, but they're contain the same wording, but it's RZ 22-01 and RZ 22-02.
They're the same, so you can have.
So RZ 2201 is Article 19, Crabapple Form-Based Code, Article 6.1 definitions to define outdoor auditorium. And then the second one is RZ 22-02, Article 20, Deerfield Form-Based Code, Article 6.1 definitions to define outdoor auditorium. So just for some background, although this use is listed in both the Deerfield and Crabapple Form-Based Codes, specific function and use table, there are no definitions either in the form-based code or the general definitions section of the zoning ordinance. I did a little research. There's many jurisdictions throughout the country that utilize a form-based code, and they have this type of use, and nobody defines it. So, not nobody. At least I couldn't find any specifically to this term. So there is a need to ensure a clear understanding of this term, as it will impact the proposed updated administrative permit for event special indoor-outdoor, section 64-1596, that will be moved from the zoning ordinance, chapter 64, to Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs. So you all saw that request a couple months ago. Actually, I could just read my own writing. It says, you already voted to eliminate the permit from the zoning ordinance on November 17, 2021. The action to eliminate this permit by the city council has been held until the new administrative permit to reside in its new location is adopted in the next couple of months. So although you've already deleted it, removed it, we're just needed a city attorney to review the drafts for this new home for this permit, which will be in Parks and Recreation. So, but we still need to define it, and it will help along with the administration of the permit when it goes to Parks and Recreation. So this is the proposed definition for both Crabapple and Deerfield. Means any publicly owned or operated property improved with a permanent structure used for outdoor performances and entertainment and intended to be used for the outdoor gathering of people for public or private assembly. So the yellow is an insertion from the city attorney after printing and distributing to you all. So just wanted you to have that recommendation from the attorney. So it's not really complicated, but I'm here to answer any questions or issues that you may have.
We have something.
Or edits.
We have something for amphitheater, don't we? I mean, it's on the list that I saw, and I was interested in how this differs from an amphitheater.
I'll have to look. Amphitheater, as far as a defined term.
Yeah. Yeah, it was on the list of uses.
Okay. Right.
And so I was wondering, what's the difference between the two?
So I don't believe that There is defined, at least in form-based code. But let me look, okay?
Okay,
So-
please,
What about just
Amphitheater is
auditorium?
64, 1800, and it is
Not
not
outdoor.
defined. Therefore, you go to Webster's, who defines amphitheater as outdoor auditorium.
Thank you.
So there's a little
Thank you, Ms.
circle.
Bird. So, I'm sorry, it's getting late. It's been a long day, so.
So do we need both definitions then?
We do. I mean, it was determined just from staff that we'd like to have a more defined, because outdoor auditorium speaks to the form-based code areas.
Mhm.
So that's why we want to have a more specific definition.
Then do we need the other?
Amphitheater.
Can we delete amphitheater?
I mean,
It's just a question of, they are the same thing, according to Webster, so.
And we can make it synonymous. I mean,
But
Say, go
amphitheater,
see.
amphitheater is not in any of the T districts. It's in,
right, okay. So we're back to my original point. I'm sorry. It's just been a long day. So there's a reason why we're doing a definition for outdoor auditorium. It's for the form-based code. So,
which is T zoning.
the T zones, right, within Deerfield and Crabapple.
So here's a question. What about just auditorium? Because there's been discussions about performing auditorium center as well. So it's like, if we don't define these things, then they're going to come up and we'll have to get a definition
So
for
we
them.
just recently actually did a text amendment where it was the indoor auditorium.
Okay.
Okay, so
All
you missed
right.
out on
All
it a
right,
little
good.
bit. I think
All
that
right,
came
so at least
before
we're
us,
covered
So that's
there.
already been taken care
Good.
of.
I was
So-
just worried because I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, somebody's going to come up with that now too.
Yeah, so.
So outdoor auditorium, just because an amphitheater in 64, 1800 is a use permit in AG1 OI mix C1, C2, M1A, M1 and M2. So that's still a use permit for those districts.
Correct.
This is specifically for T, and it does not, and does it need a use permit, or is it just up to the staff for?
So let's go back. It's the intention is, we can look at the table. I don't have it memorized. Let's see what it says. So each Crabapple and Deerfield can have a little bit of differences in their uses, but so for Crabapple, we go to outdoor auditorium, civic, So outdoor auditorium would require a warrant under T2 and Crabapple, and then it is allowed by right in T3, T4, T4 open, and T5. It's not permitted in what we call T4 reserved, which is there's some subdivisions who chose to keep basically their old zoning regulations. So that's in Crabapple, and we did recently define assembly hall, indoor auditorium, because there was not, so that's just above that that was mentioned earlier. So that has been taken care of. And then for Deerfield, I apologize for.
Warrant and T2 and by right and all the other ones.
So in Deerfield. By warrant T2, And it's by right for all of the other transect zones, T3, T4, T4 permissive, T4 open, T5, and T6. So.
You say by right, what does that mean? That they can just go
So
ahead
like
and
if
do that?
somebody proposed to do an outdoor auditorium.
I think that's problematic. That needs to be reevaluated. This
So
is
we
part
can
of
do
my,
that.
That's part of the issue around the whole Highway 9 and Deerfield is we haven't looked at these since 2012. And it's things like this that end up getting us into trouble, and then we get boxed in and we can't make good decisions.
So I
that's my
think
comment.
we had been looking at this as the administrative, temporary, special event context. So I think that's something that we need to look at, possibly maybe adding another definition and that deals with a permanent structure. I don't know. I mean, I think that they were,
I'm kind of surprised that we don't have, I mean, my question is, okay, so we did this over in Crabapple, but Highway 9, we're doing something else. I'm like, they're two business districts. I don't understand what would be driving differences that were, everybody gets the right. Then that boxes us into, for me, we get stuck with bad decisions. I mean, because we've had a couple of these properties along Highway 9 where the zoning, we ended up having to go back to city council on because it really wasn't the right use for that piece of land, kind of similar to what we just talked about.
So again, I think as we were looking at this definition, we were in the, and it may be our mistake as staff, we were looking at it in relation to the administrative permit that is not a permanent type situation. So, I'd be happy to go back. We could defer this. And I would have loved to have the other staff person who's working on the other Parks and Rec text amendment for the administrative permit for special events to be able to kind of put it all together. And maybe there's something that I'm missing, but this was needed to make things make sense for the administrative permit, which is not permanent. But there are going to be areas that maybe that's something we need to look at. For instance, here at the Green, so there's an outdoor auditorium. It's zone T4 open. It's permitted by right. So I think that might be a good idea is to look at, well, where do we want these outdoor structures to be located?
Right.
So
Absolutely. Yeah, where's the best use, I guess, versus saying, well, it's just okay, all of these, that may have been fine early on, but I think now, we're over 10 years later, I think we need to relook at that and go, that may not make sense anymore. And that's where I'm coming from. I mean,
right. No, I totally get that.
Yeah, we've had a couple I can check off the list.
Robin, from a process standpoint, if we do relook at where the outdoor auditorium is allowed by right, especially in Deerfield, since it's inconsistent with Crabapple, that can be, we will still need a definition of outdoor auditorium.
Right.
Do you see the definition changing, or should we approve this definition and then recommend the approval of this definition and then go fix the
I think,
by
I think
right?
that's a solution. Yes.
Well, if we need the definition, because
I mean,
we don't
it's
have
already there.
I was going to come in. Those are separate issues. One is just, we've got a use.
We need a
get a
definition, but then we
definition.
got to deal with the
This
other
is-
one. I would
It kind
agree
of
with
brought
that.
up the whole issue of where is it permitted, this use, so. The definition is needed, thank you. But we need to relook at where it is allowed to be.
Yeah, the application.
What's the best way to go
Or
about
it could not, it doesn't have to be by right, it could be by use permit. and then we create a
For that.
separate use permit to have the auditorium,
Right.
outdoor auditorium. So,
Right.
Yeah.
I just think we just need to
So that's just
relook at
something
it.
we need to look at more closely, so.
I guess my only question on that too is outdoor. What does outdoor mean? Does it mean like a horse riding rink? Would a horse riding rink fall into this? It doesn't have walls. It's got a roof over it.
And it is kind of like an auditorium.
Auditorium like, so what
I've
is the
been to
definition?
parties in those before. I mean, so, yeah.
I can tell what we would do would be, if outdoor is not defined in the code, we would go to the city official dictionary, which I have in my office.
Okay.
Or
But I think your point to
I have a
Commissioner
version.
Nolte is that you think about a riding arena that almost, it fits this definition.
Right.
Now, I mean, how many riding arenas are we going to have in Crabapple? I bet we still need to go back to look at the uses, where it's allowed. How do we want it to be permitted? Should it be by warrant? Should it be by use? Or should it be at all? So I think that's a great example. I don't think it excludes that.
Right.
Yeah.
Like where it says any non-publicly, so is it private? You're basically saying privately owned?
Yeah, so the green is privately owned with the amphitheater on it.
So, okay, hypothetically, you could, just make that privately owned. And then, does this have to be solely used for performances and entertainment? Or could it be for anything else along with being used for performances and entertainment?
Like, what are you thinking?
I don't know. That's why I'm just trying to understand, like, pardon me?
Yoga lessons.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, it could be, yeah, it could be. I
So-
mean, they do yoga over there, not necessarily in the amphitheater, but it's a kind of a defined space for the public, so. that's a
But is
good
the
point.
intention to have some sort of administrative use permit for the sole purpose of performance and entertainment, or is it as long as, you can do that and you can do anything else too?
Fundraising events, like what they do in Alpharetta, at what? Marist Park, or what is that?
Marist Bank.
Right, right. I mean, they have
Whatever it
craft
changed
shows,
hands.
they have
Exactly.
Yeah, they have, outside of performances, they have like just networking events over there and things
They
like
have
that
all
too.
kinds of.
They have outdoor
They
movies.
do a bunch of
something.
fundraisers. Movies, there you go.
Yeah, so like, I guess, what do you see as the intention of this use permit? Help maybe better define.
Well, I think we're a little ahead of, I haven't looked at it in that, as far as a regular use permit, but, for an administrative, temporary, special event, I mean, I could see it being activities, not necessarily performances.
And then that structure it doesn't have to be enclosed.
Correct. No, yeah, it's definitely, yeah.
It has to have a roof or no?
Doesn't say.
I mean, I don't think we've gotten
Yeah.
to that specific definition.
Yeah,
We
no,
just said
the
a
ring,
permanent
yeah.
structure. It doesn't have to have walls to it. It could just even be a raised cement area, technically. It's
So
somewhere where you can
Matilda's,
perform.
does that fall into this category?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Matilda's, does that fall into this category?
I mean, that wasn't, the use permit that was used was not, well, it's a different zoning district, totally.
Right.
It's not form-based code.
Right.
So.
But it seems similar.
So do you think we have enough to?
I'll try it.
So did I hear Samit say that we should have privately instead of non-publicly?
I mean, I think that's the intention. I think that would be cleaner.
Rather than non-publicly owned, privately owned?
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that
What, to keep it the way it is?
either way,
Okay.
if the council, or if the planning commission prefers it that way, I have no problem with that.
Because I think the intent was if we have a public park with a public piece of property that has, an amphitheater on it, it's our property.
I believe non-public and private are synonyms as far as I'm concerned for these purposes. So whichever you prefer.
So no, and then, so we're not saying that this needs to be solely for performances and entertainment?
Not as written.
I mean.
No,
right,
not as
it's-
written, that's what I'm saying, but like, is it an intention where we would need to use the word hypothetically with the permanent structure solely for performances and entertainment, you know?
Maybe you could add something after entertainment,
What about
and other
multi-use?
organized activities. I don't know, that's pretty general.
I mean, what about multi-use?
I'm sorry.
Multi-use?
Yeah,
It does have intended to be used for the gathering of people.
right.
Mm-hmm.
But that, there's an and
And there.
after, so it's, right? It's
And
an
it's supposed to be
and.
for
Right now
the
it's-
outdoor gathering, I
The
guess.
structure is
Updated
used for
version.
performances and entertainment, doesn't say solely. But at some point in time, the structure is used for performances and entertainment. And it's also intended to be used for gatherings of people for public or private assembly.
And Sumit over here on the side said, and it's outdoors.
No, I mean, the
Oh, yeah,
updated
sorry.
definition is
Yes.
outdoor.
Outdoor
Sorry,
gathering.
I'm looking at the old version, not the version that I updated.
Because we have lost the idea that this is outdoors in the
Yeah.
definition.
Well, That's
This
the
could-
old, I think.
You could
That's-
consume this to be indoors too.
No, that's
That's
why.
why we did we made the change. If you
That's the
look
old
at your
one. That's
screen.
outdated.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm
yeah.
behind.
No,
That's
no.
okay.
It's late.
No, it's on the presentation she just.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
sorry. Don't worry, we're all there.
Yeah,
We're
it was
good.
a recent change.
Fred's given up over here, and I can't see it, what it's.
Is it not working?
I just, yes.
No, it's not there right now.
Okay.
It's just
Oh,
got
yeah.
all of us. Yeah.
It's on mine, but okay, I see. They need to scroll it back up. Please? Throw it back on the screen. There you
There
go.
you go.
I'm sorry, I see it on my screen, so I'm just
there
assuming
now.
everybody else sees it.
Right.
And now, as we're looking at that, what,
I think you're a little bit, some people are discussing the possibility of adding some more descriptives that talk about non-organized.
If you think we're ready for it. If you think we've got enough, there's enough,
oh, because I didn't make those.
right? Or is there enough ambiguity just to defer?
Didn't you want to come back with someone to put this in context for us? I heard you say
Parks
that
and
very
Recs.
early on.
Person.
I can, if that's, I mean, it was more specifically to, I mean, we have to deal with the uses, but
I'll let
Scared.
And this is only, I know you have on this report or whatever, it says, for special indoor or outdoor,
I feel like I need to think about this.
updated administrative permit for events, special indoor or outdoor
right, so.
to replace.
Yeah, so that's the very general special event permit that's being worked on right now. So I know, are you speaking to, because it speaks to indoor?
Uh-huh.
They're just trying to deal with the outdoor part, so.
Okay.
Because of having events at areas like the Green, where it's privately held and there's amphitheater there. So it's just one part of looking at that administrative permit. So no, it doesn't need to cover indoor as well.
Okay.
I would move that we defer this until the next month's meeting.
I can speak, yeah, to Anita to explain kind of in more detail, the context of where it's going. And at the same time, we can talk about, well, I'll talk to Bob and then talk to council about the use, the districts that it's permitted at by right now, and maybe relooking at that as possibly requiring use permits or whatever, so.
Yep, so we've got a motion.
We got a plan.
Do we have a second?
Better, sure, Paul. That we defer to the next meeting, RZ,
Okay.
Somebody needs to say, oh, you made the motion, right?
Oh, I
Yeah, you
second-
just
I
did.
second.
Ron, oh, okay.
Seconded by Ron,
It's too
so-
far
I'm
back.
sorry, I lost. I'm sorry,
So-
guys.
I'm just that long.
Any discussion on that?
So Ron made the first and
No,
you.
Fred made the
Fred
first.
made the
Ron made the second.
Ron seconded.
And-
Okay, thank you.
Just got it.
I got
And
it.
Robin,
I'm
for,
so-
Been
Robin,
drinking.
for, if we defer, does that cause you any problem?
Not really. They haven't even gotten to a first read yet. They're getting ready to, so I don't think it'll be a problem. It'll just be a month behind, so.
I'd rather have it right, so.
We still have Webster's, you know.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Call for vote.
Yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, it's carried, unanimous.
There you go.
We need to do 2202 also.
Yeah.
Vote on the second one.
Defer the second one.
Oh, yes, correct. You're right. There were two. I forgot that other one.
No, we got to do RZ.
Yeah, we got to do, I need, yeah,
have
can we
to
get a
do the other
motion?
There you go. Go ahead.
Okay, I move we defer RZ 222-02
I second.
Okay, it's seconded by Laura. Got a motion by Fred, seconded by Laura. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
So, at the beginning, there was some training topics. Bob already and Sarah talked a little bit about the Deerfield Highway 9. I wanted to go ahead and just give you an overview of our department. I think it was asked, Commissioner Nolte had asked for this. I'm not going to read it all out, but, and I put little holes in it so you can put it in your binder that I gave you
There you go.
earlier.
Excellent.
So basically, the purpose and mission of our department is evaluates issues relative to development occurring within Milton with these goals: enhance quality of life of Milton residents, preserve and enhance Milton's character, provide superior customer service by streamlining the development review process, create safe and healthy environment by enforcing development regulations. So then I listed all the staff, which I think we have the largest department other than police and fire in the city. So
Robin,
anyway,
this includes the new one.
correct. Yes. So she was just promoted to Planner 1, and her concentration will be on our GIS system that was spoken about. So,
Great.
okay. And then,
One question, Robin. There used to be if all else fails, call Angie. She'll help you figure out who you need to talk to. Is Angie still
oh,
around?
so she's in Public Works. She's the customer service, but she deals with the complaints a lot, if there's a dead deer or if there's, a hole somewhere in one of the streets. So we don't really have a front desk. We don't have anybody just answering calls. It's like you call in and then you pick where you want to go. So we don't have just a city hall receptionist. I think everybody calls me. Not
Well, see,
Angie.
that is the challenge,
Probably
is
not
that the
good.
usual default is, who should you call? Well, it's somewhere in community development, call Robin, and it's like.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
And
There's
but I
weird
know
things
it's
that I don't
really-
know anything about, like police
But I
stuff.
know
I'm
it's
like,
really not Robin, it's somebody else, so.
Right. But all the
we do-
names, they're on the website with the emails and phone numbers, so.
But if they call Angie and it is community.
Yeah, she's
development,
really good about, she's very knowledgeable, so she knows what's in her lane and what's not, and she knows usually where to put somebody.
Okay.
So she's good, but she's in Public Works. Again, we have different sections. We have current zoning, which is basically what I do and what Shuba does with DRB and BZA. Planning Commission, and Tracy assists me because she works with the preliminary plats and other assignments. And then City Council, whoever needs to be there to cover the different topics that may come up or different items. The comprehensive plan, Jackie, she's new to us about a year, but she was kind of plunged into the comprehensive plan, so she's been doing great. And then land development is like where you're going, start your development of pushing the dirt and going vertical. well, actually just pushing the dirt. So Tracy oversees all the various permits as they come in, and she's been really instrumental in our new electronic plan review system and tracking system, and deals with land disturbance permits, final plats, minor plats, soil erosion inspection and construction compliance. There's a lot of paperwork that has to be done for the state. And so Jerry and Josh work on those reports and with help from different other staff members. So there's a lot going on. The tree conservation, Sandra, you've heard a lot about that lately. We just had Arbor Day and Plant Milton. Buildings and inspections, Ron. So right now we don't have a current chief building official. Bob is our interim. Because he's a state fire marshal and a registered architect, he can fill that in, but they're desperately, and that sounds really negative, but we really, really want a building official. It's just been hard with the just the workforce and trying to find people. I think that's all over, having to find good quality people. So he is acting as that, and he's still the city architect. When he became the community development director, it wasn't like we went out and hired another city architect. So he plays that job, but he does that job as well. And then sustainability, Teresa Stickles just retired about a month ago, so she's no longer with us. And so some of those responsibilities have been given to Public Works, like adopt a road. Also, she was in charge of waste management and making sure all the waste haulers were licensed. I don't know how it got into our department, so I think we're getting that over to Public Works. Some other areas will be Parks and Rec, but there still definitely are some sustainability issues that we will be dealing with. We'll still be having paint collections, Rivers Alive, recycling, green communities, septic system maintenance. And then last but not least is code enforcement, Chris and Deirdre. They have been here with us for a long time. And so anyway, so that's kind of what comprises our department and what we do. So just feel free anytime if you have any issues or questions. We'll be happy to get back with you on anything. So
I think, I sent you the list of things that we can knock off as we go through this.
Right.
Additional training. And a lot of that's going to be more of a question and answer type of thing. 'Cause a lot of that is information, so maybe we'll just pick a couple of those every meeting and be sure we just get those addressed.
Right. Yep.
That'd be great.
Sounds good.
All right. Anybody else have any future business issues, quick discussion on this?
We adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, thank you, guys.
10:50.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.